Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
26, Chapter 26, Never seen anyone this rotten. It feels so good to be free again. Lux looked at Luke gratefully, letting out a long breath. You have no idea how miserable my day has been. I can kinda tell, Luke said, continuing to sip his tea, thinking back to what he just witnessed. Forget it. Let's eat cake. Lux's bright, sparkling eyes locked onto the delicate cake box. She said happily, this is my favorite place to buy from. I thought there was no chance today, thank you so much. As long as it's to your liking, Luke said with a smile. As a thank you gift, I'm willing to share half of this cake with you. Lux declared generously. She opened the box. Inside was a beautifully made strawberry cake, plus 2 little forks. But when she saw the single lonely strawberry sitting on top, she hesitated. One strawberry, how was she supposed to split that evenly? Luke said politely, no need. I'll just watch you eat. Lux refused on the spot. How is that acceptable? We have to split it. You can be the one to divide it. No need to make it complicated. I'll just have a little, Luke said. As he spoke, he picked up the small fork, speared the strawberry with pinpoint precision, and popped it into his mouth in one bite. Lux froze, staring as that vivid red strawberry disappeared into Luke's mouth. I'm not being greedy. Strawberries just happen to be my favorite fruit, Luke said with a satisfied sigh. Miss Crownguard, you're truly a good person. The moment he thought about how he'd already secretly eaten a whole cake on the way here, his conscience gave a faint, guilty twinge. Lux really was such a kind girl. Why, you're happy, that's what matters, Lux said through a forced smile. At that moment, it felt like her heart was bleeding, as if she wasn't the one who loved strawberries the most. She lowered her head and stared blankly at the strawberry cake that no longer had a strawberry. A cake without strawberries. It had no soul. But today, she had to take care of her guest first. Lux, be strong. Her sadness was painfully obvious, and Luke didn't have to look hard to notice. You look pretty upset. Was that strawberry really that important to you? Hearing that, Lux already feeling wrong, it couldn't help but nod. Of course, Luke was asking when he already knew the answer. He just couldn't resist teasing her, since Miss Crownguard always looked so cheerful. So he casually added, actually, I already ate one on the way here. Lux snapped her head up and stared at him in disbelief. Why didn't you say so earlier? Don't you know the strawberry is the soul of the cake? You already ate one and you still did that. If I'd known it would turn out like this, I would have said so, Luke said innocently. Why, you're the worst. Lux finally saw through that innocent face and recognized what kind of person he really was. She couldn't take it anymore. 2 strawberry cakes, and this guy got 2 strawberries all to himself. And he left her with a strawberry cake that didn't even have a strawberry. He did it on purpose. Shameless. Lux had never met someone this nasty in her entire life. So are you eating it or not? Luke's eyes were already on the cake as he reached out with his sinful hand. Stop. Lux reacted instantly, grabbed the cake, and sprinted away. Luke laughed. Didn't you say the strawberry is the soul? You still want a cake with no soul? The soul is important, sure, but a soul needs a body too. They're equally important. Lux argued righteously. Soul and body, she had to get at least one. Then she started eating. The way she ate was pretty adorable. Even though she was still mad, the sweetness of the cream gave Miss Crownguard a tiny bit of happiness. After finishing the cake, Lux seemed to recover a lot of her mood. She sat back down, poured herself a cup of tea, and said, I almost forgot you're a guest. Since you helped me get my freedom back, I'll forgive you for the strawberry thing. She'd gotten so angry at this guy just now that she'd almost lost her composure. That wasn't ladylike. Thank you for your generosity, Miss Crownguard, Luke said, grinning. But Lux's tone abruptly shifted. There was more. You have to do one thing for me. Luke asked curiously, what is it? It'll be easy for you, Lux said, glancing toward the living room entrance and lowering her voice without realizing it. Go tell my mother and get her to agree to let me go out this afternoon. That's so simple. Why don't you say it yourself? Luke took a leisurely sip of tea. If it were that simple, would I have been confined this morning? Lux shot him a glare and urged, go on. All right, Luke said. He finished his tea, stood up, and walked out of the living room. Lux stood too, following behind carefully, whispering a reminder. My mother should be in the second to last room down the hall. Luke nodded. There weren't many rooms. She found it immediately. He stopped at the door, knocked, and called out, Lady Agatha, are you in? I am. The door isn't locked, come in, Agatha's voice answered from inside. Luke pushed the door open. Agatha was wearing round-framed glasses, stitching something with needle and thread, seemingly a classical painting. So people here were into that too. When Agatha saw Luke enter, she set her work aside and asked kindly, "What is it?" "I want to look around other parts of Demacia City this afternoon," Luke said, coming up with a very solid excuse. "But I'm not familiar with a lot of places on my own, so I'd like Lux to come along and show me around." "Even so," Agatha asked suspiciously, "Lux was the one who told you to come, wasn't she?" To be fair, as a mother, she really did know her daughter too well. That intuition was terrifyingly sharp. Luke shook his head. "Of course not. This is entirely my own idea." "Is that so? Then you've found the right person," Agatha said with a smile, not overthinking it. "No one knows the capital better than that girl. She's the one who runs around having fun all day." Luke asked, "So you're agreeing?" "Why wouldn't I? Go on, just don't miss dinner," Agatha said warmly. She seemed extremely accommodating toward him. "Thank you, Lady Agatha," Luke said. He left the room and gently closed the door behind him. Once outside, he spotted a small head peeking out from behind the far wall, Lux secretly watching. Luke raised his hand and gave her a thumbs up. Lux immediately beamed, stepping out openly at last. The instant she did, the door opened again. Agatha walked out from inside. Lux jumped in fright and quickly retreated back. "Why is that child hiding?" Agatha glanced at her strangely, then instructed, "Same as always, once you're out, don't just focus on having fun. Look after His Highness, the second prince." "Understood. Understood." Lux straightened up on the spot, like a soldier receiving an important mission. 27, Chapter 27, Half a Friend. With Agatha's permission secured, the two of them left the Crown Guard estate without any trouble. Lux seemed to have already forgotten what had just happened. In a great mood, she walked ahead, humming some little tune Luke didn't recognize. Luke followed behind, glanced up at the sun still giving off leftover warmth. The light was a bit blinding, and he couldn't help asking, "So where are we going?" "To see a friend," Lux answered without turning around. "I was going to go yesterday, but I ran into you halfway." Luke thought about it for a moment. "Is it okay if I come along?" This time Lux turned back and looked at him. "Of course. You just got to the capital. Do you even know any friends here?" Luke shook his head. "Then I'll introduce her to you. Hopefully you two can become good friends too." Lux smiled, bright as the sunlight itself. She really was kind. Even though she'd only known Luke for a couple of days, she was already trying to help him build a circle of friends. Maybe it was because of the story she'd heard yesterday. Luke thought for a second, then asked, "Then are we friends?" Let me think." Lux snorted, and the moment she did, she remembered what he'd pulled earlier. With a spoiled little huff, she declared, Half a friend." "That's right. Do you have any other half-friends, Miss Crown Guard?" "Nope." "All right then. It's an honor to be Miss Crown Guard's first ever half-friend," Luke said with a grin, feeling like that at least made him kind of special. Lux couldn't help laughing at that. In a light, easy mood, the two chatted as they headed toward their destination. It wasn't far. About half an hour later, they arrived. It was a church. At the top of a short flight of steps stood an open white door, and above it was a stained glass window shimmering with colors. People in white clerical clothing went in and out. The one consistent emblem they wore was two diamond-shaped stars overlapped together, stars representing light. Seeing that, Luke already knew who they were. The Illuminators. A Demacian religious order, a charitable group that helped the sick and the poor. "This is the place. Let's go in," Lux said, taking the lead up the steps. Luke went up with her. The moment they entered, before Lux even had time to look around, someone called her name. "Lux, what are you doing here?" It was a young woman's voice. Following the sound, Luke saw a girl wearing a silver-white robe. It fit snugly on her, making it obvious she had a great figure. She had long brown hair, about the same age as Lux, and just as striking. Her brown eyes were bright and lively, giving her a fresh, clean sort of presence. "Of course I'm here to see you." Lux ran over happily. "I heard you joined the Illuminators. I wanted to come yesterday, but something came up and delayed me. I'm really happy you came." The girl smiled too. Then she noticed Luke behind Lux, looking around curiously, and asked with some confusion, "And he is?" "I was just about to tell you. Yesterday was because of him." "Ahem, what I'm about to say, you need to be prepared," Lux said, suddenly grinning like she was about to reveal some grand secret. She shifted aside so Luke was fully in the girl's view, then announced, "Allow me to introduce him properly, Luke Lightshield, Demacia's second prince." "Huh." The girl clearly hadn't been prepared at all. She froze, her face full of question marks. Lux looked extremely satisfied with that reaction. Then she started introducing Luke right back. "And this is Kahina Bovelli, my best friend in the capital." House Bovelli. Luke had already heard of them before. Demacia's top commercial powerhouse. Like the Crown Guards, they were at the very top of noble society. In Demacia, their reputation was no less than the Crown Guards. Or rather, no one in Demacia didn't know this family. Their head, Lord Barrett Bovelli, was famous in his own right, and also a current steward within the Illuminators. The Illuminators' origins traced back to House Bovelli. Long ago, the family had already been helping Demacia's poor and sick. And apparently, Barrett was also a close friend of Luke's father, Jarvan III. "Hello," Luke said, after hearing the introduction, offering a friendly greeting. Kahina still looked like her brain hadn't caught up to what she'd just heard. She slowly turned her head and stared at Lux. "Lux, you can't just joke about something like that." "I swear on our friendship, I'm not joking," Lux said with a serious face. Seeing her like that, Kahina finally realized Lux wasn't messing with her. Still dazed, she blurted, "But how have I never heard about this?" "Even I only found out yesterday," Lux said with a mischievous little laugh. Then she looked at Luke. "Can I tell her the details?" Luke knew what she meant and nodded. It won't be long before everyone knows anyway. He'd never planned to hide his identity. In a few days at most, once the date was set, the entire kingdom would know Demacia had a second prince. Then sit down. "I'll tell you properly," Lux said, pulling Kahina over to find a place to sit. Luke, with nothing to do in the meantime, wandered around and looked at the place, while Miss Crownguard vividly reenacted the story like it had all happened to her. And Kahina, from start to finish, stayed in exactly one state, completely stunned. By the time Lux finished talking herself hoarse, Kahina had finally made it through the whole bizarre, twisty story. "I'm going to get some water. You two talk," Lux said, standing up. She really was thirsty. Judging by how casually she moved, she'd clearly been here before and knew where to go. After saying that, she darted off. Luke watched Kahina's gaze slowly drift toward him. He smiled and repeated his greeting. "Hello." "Hello," Kahina answered hesitantly. She'd never expected a piece of news this explosive to get dropped on her out of nowhere. Then she hurriedly corrected herself. "No, hello, Your Highness." If Lux swore on their friendship, then there was no way she was lying. Which meant the person in front of her was a genuine prince. As a young lady from one of the kingdom's most prominent noble houses, Kahina naturally understood that status mattered. She stood up and gave a proper knight's salute, respectful and formal. "At ease," Luke said. Then he added, "Lady Bevelle, pleased to meet you. I hope we'll get along." "I as well." Kahina let out a small breath, forcing herself to calm down. 28 Chapter 28 Lady Yuna, EC. "So how did you and Lux meet?" Kahina asked curiously. After listening to Lux talk for so long, it felt like Lux had been the thread tying everything together from beginning to end. But Lux hadn't explained how she'd even run into this new prince in the first place. Noticing the hint of formality in Kahina's tone, Luke said, "We're about the same age. Just talk to me normally." Luke didn't actually dislike being treated respectfully, but if it made people keep their distance, it got boring fast. Besides, it wasn't like he was some shut-in. Of course he wanted to make more friends. "I'm being a bit stiff," Kahina said, embarrassed. As for how Lux and I met, Luke had only gotten halfway through the sentence when Miss Crownguard suddenly sprinted back, slid in front of him, and still panting snatched the conversation away. "We teamed up yesterday to expose a scam, so that's how we met, right?" Lux said quickly. Afterward, she shot Luke a look half warning, half pleading, with those little puppy eyes. So Luke nodded and confirmed, "That's right." That whole silent exchange didn't escape Kahina's eyes. Her first instinct was that something was definitely off, but she didn't make a big deal out of it, just nodded in realization. "So that's what happened." Lux let out a quiet sigh of relief. She'd been halfway to getting water when she heard the key part of the topic. If Kahina found out what happened yesterday, she'd laugh at Lux for a whole year. Way too dangerous. To keep the conversation from going any further, Lux took the initiative. "Do you have anything else to do later?" Kahina thought about it. "Everything I needed to do is already done. I don't think I have anything else." "Perfect. Then let's go out and have some fun together," Lux invited. "Sure," Kahina agreed without refusing. After a quick discussion, the three decided Lux would lead the way. When it came to having fun, she was clearly the most experienced. Just like Lady Agatha had said, no one knew the capital's fun spots better than Lux. The three walked down the street, chatting as they looked around for anything new or interesting. Most of the time, Luke just watched. He couldn't really get into girls' conversations, but seeing two pretty girls talk and laugh like little silver bells was still pretty pleasant. My purse, my purse." Suddenly, a few voices with a sobbing edge pushed into their ears. All three heard it at the same time, and plenty of people turned toward the sound. An elderly woman, heavy-set, gray at the temples, easily over 60, was crying out. She hunched there helplessly, flustered as she searched around for something, looking completely lost. Many people hurried past. Some shook their heads helplessly and sighed. "Isn't that Lola's mother?" Kahina narrowed her eyes and recognized the woman. Seeing Lux and Luke's questioning looks, she explained quickly, "Lola is a girl we went to visit a few days ago. She's had epilepsy since she was little. She can't speak, can't walk, and needs medication just to get by. Her parents took care of her the whole time. 2 years ago, her father passed away, leaving only her mother. After the Illuminators confirmed the situation, they provided assistance." Before she could explain more, she hurried forward. Lux had been about to go too, and she followed. "Mrs. Yuna, what happened?" Lux asked. Hearing her, the old woman looked up. The moment she saw Kahina, it was like she'd found a lifeline. She grabbed Kahina's arms anxiously. "Miss Bevellamy, purse is gone. That money was for Lola's medicine." Lux's expression turned concerned. When did you lose it? Miss Crown Guard Mrs. Yuna recognized Lux and answered quickly, I only know that about 5 minutes ago, when I checked, it was still there. There was a lot of money inside, and I was scared I'd lose it, so I kept it in my inner pocket. She let go and pointed to her inner pocket near her waist somewhere you could confirm with a quick touch. But now there was a cut there, and it looked like the purse had slipped right out through the opening. Did you bump into anyone during that time? Lux asked again. It was obvious she cared about this. She was kind-hearted by nature. If she saw someone like this, she was going to help. I don't know, the street was crowded. I brushed past so many people. Mrs. Yuna tried hard to remember, then shook her head again. Luke looked at the tear and said, then it was almost certainly stolen. You probably checked your purse too many times, so the thief noticed you and targeted you. The cut was clearly made with a blade. Not just Luke, Lux and Kahina could tell too. Two didn't know I was scared the money would be lost, so I couldn't stop worrying, and I kept checking. Mrs. Yuna's last bit of hope collapsed, and she started crying helplessly. She knew it in her heart, but she'd still clung to the possibility that she'd dropped it somewhere. The money mattered too much. That was why she kept checking again and again, only for a thief to notice her because of it. At this point, all three were sure Mrs. Yuna's purse had been stolen. There really wasn't much you could do about this kind of thing. Luke knew every place had people like this, and they were truly hateful. Because they didn't pick their targets. Here's what you do, Lux decided. She instructed Mrs. Yuna, go ask the nearby guards for help, and tell them I sent you. If it's only been 5 minutes, the thief might not have gotten far. We'll do our best to look. Miss Crown Guard, thank you truly, Mrs. Yuna said, wiping at her eyes as she went off in a daze to seek help. The money in the purse was critical. Having it stolen like this was a heavy blow. Inside was the money that kept her daughter alive. We don't have much time. Let's split up and search, Lux said. We'll meet at the intersection ahead in 20 minutes. Lux was an action-first kind of person. She didn't know if it would work, but she believed you had to try even if there was only the tiniest sliver of hope. That was the part of her that genuinely moved people. The three split up on the spot, each choosing a different direction. Even though they all knew the chances of recovering the purse were already extremely slim. The capital was huge. 5 minutes was more than enough time for a nimble thief to slip far away. Trying to find the person who stole Mrs. Yuna's purse in a city this big was like looking for a needle in a haystack. As Luke searched, he couldn't help thinking his day had been eventful. He scanned the crowd and saw passers-by hurrying along, each busy with their own lives. And he saw Mrs. Yuna crying in front of the guards. The hunched, helpless outline of her back looked so painfully out of place compared to the rushing crowd around her, like two different pictures overlapping. 29, Chapter 29, and you still say you were just getting lucky? The agreed 20 minutes ticked by second. Luke walked the streets, feeling the sun's lingering warmth, but he didn't find a single useful lead. Honestly, the more time passed, the lower the odds of catching the thief who'd stolen the purse. At this point, it wasn't slim anymore, it was truly, genuinely down to dumb luck. Figuring it was about time, Luke headed toward their meeting spot. When he arrived, Lux and Kahina were also walking in from opposite directions. Under the blazing summer heat, it was obvious they'd searched seriously. Sweat dotted their foreheads. Luke asked, anything? Lux and Kahina both shook their heads. Their mood had clearly been affected, too heavy and subdued. Even Lux couldn't force a smile now. I covered such a wide area, but I didn't even know where to start, Kahina sighed. Deep down, they all knew what they were doing was basically pointless. Just burning their stamina for nothing. Ugh, Lux let out a long sigh and sat down on a bench, still stuck on the whole thing. Don't think about it. I'll replace the money Mrs. Yuna lost later, Kahina said, gently patting Lux's shoulder. After all, it's our duty as illuminators. Do we just let the thief get away with it? Lux's eyes were downcast. If Mrs. Yuna hadn't met us today, who would have replaced her money? She couldn't accept it. Because the thief hadn't stolen just a purse. They'd stolen a family's support. But Lux also knew she had no solution right now. And she knew she couldn't change this reality. There were thieves everywhere. Kahina felt the same bitterness. In my opinion, these thieves operate in groups. We don't necessarily have to catch the exact one who stole the purse. Maybe we can start with other thieves. In truth, all three of them had considered that. But the problem is, do you think a thief is going to tell you they're a thief? Lux looked around, helpless. Everyone passed by, normally different expressions, different habits. Maybe one of them was the thief, but no one would be stupid enough to admit it. I've got an idea. We can try it, Luke said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. If he couldn't find the thief, then he'd make the thief come to him. The two girls turned to look at him at the same time, pretty eyes unblinking, clearly asking what the idea was. Talking won't help. Let's just do it, Luke said, scanning left and right before quickly locking onto a direction. This time, he didn't even need to call anyone over. A white figure soon appeared, walking over with perfect timing. Your Highness, what do you need? The white-clad guard asked with a bow. At this point, the guard was numb inside. And you still say you're just trying your luck? Yeah, sure. Take out all the money you're carrying, Luke said. Then he looked at the two girls. And you too as well. The white-clad guard moved the fastest, no questions asked. He pulled out his coin pouch and handed it straight to Luke. Lux and Kahina didn't really understand, but since Luke said it, they also reached into their pockets. Together, they managed to scrape up a decent sum. A short while later, a young man walked down the street as if nothing was happening, like some country kid entering the capital for the first time, looking around in wide-eyed curiosity. Then, with one careless step, he bumped into someone head-on. Clink clink clink. Sorry. He blurted out. At the same time, a crisp, ringing sound burst out as one gold coin after another spilled onto the ground, rolling in every direction. Under the sunlight, those coins gleamed bright and eye-catching. This was not a small amount. The scene drew plenty of attention. People looked over and saw the young man panic as he crouched down to gather the scattered coins. The person he'd bumped into and a few kind passers-by helped him pick them up too. Thank you, the young man said, almost in tears as he thanked everyone one by one. He gathered the coins back up, then carefully tucked them into his inner pocket beneath his clothes. This time, he didn't dare get distracted. He focused on walking forward. That young man was, of course, Luke. Today he'd realized something. That sixth sense enhancement potion he'd thought was useless was actually far stronger than he'd imagined. It wasn't only a passive ability, sometimes he could actively use it. When Luke was relaxed, it functioned like an alarm bell in the background. Like the scam group from earlier today, he'd immediately felt the number of people tailing him increase. And when Luke was focused, his perception became even sharper. Like when he'd searched for the white-clad guard earlier, he'd clearly sensed that someone's gaze was coming from a particular direction. At first, he'd assumed it was just a feeling, no guarantee there was actually someone there, so he treated it as a gamble. But after a few more times, Luke realized there was barely any luck involved at all. Now, he'd been walking for almost half an hour. Plenty of eyes had drifted toward him along the way, and Luke didn't know what emotions were behind those looks. But one thing he could confirm was this. For the past half hour, there had been a single gaze watching him the whole time. Why haven't you made a move yet? Luke frowned, puzzled. But at this point, he didn't have any more patience. He stopped, turned around, and slowly swept his eyes across each face in the crowd. Then suddenly he made very brief eye contact with someone. That person immediately looked away, showing no obvious reaction at all. Don't run! Luke suddenly shouted. He pushed off the ground and sprinted straight toward that direction. Startled, pedestrians threw him odd looks. At first, the thief hiding among the crowd believed there was no way he'd been exposed. But very quickly, he felt it. Luke was charging directly at him. Under that pressure, panic finally cracked through his expression. A bead of sweat slid down his forehead as Luke closed the distance fast. Keep pretending, or drop the act. The moment the choice appeared, the thief didn't hesitate. He bolted. His arms pumped hard, full sprint, like his life depended on it. Screw pretending. He didn't know how he'd been exposed. Maybe he hadn't been exposed at all. But even if it was only a 1 in 10,000 chance, he wasn't gambling on it. Because he couldn't fall here. The villagers were still waiting for him to return. He'd come to the capital carrying the will of his captured companions' faces flashing through his mind, those fellow thieves who'd been taken, turning into fuel beneath his feet as he ran like the wind. I am the man destined to become the king of thieves. He roared, blood boiling. The next second, the so-called king of thieves was sent flying by a kick that came out of nowhere. He tumbled several times and finally crashed into a pile of roadside hay before stopping. I was already irritated today, the white-clad guard said, exhaling deeply as he looked down at the thief sprawled on the ground. And you still had to yell. The guard felt his mood improve instantly, like a massive knot had finally loosened. The thief struggled upright, furious, hammering his fist into the ground. Impossible. Where did I mess up? He couldn't understand it. Not at all. Ha! The white-clad guard glanced at the thief's face and let out a contemptuous snort, feeling even better. Can't figure it out. Good. If you could figure it out, would I still be this miserable? There will be a little surprise on Sunday. 30, Chapter 30, if we don't catch him, who do we catch? A lot of chapters today. 30, Chapter 30, if we don't catch him, who do we catch? A lot of chapters today. Many passers-by were startled by what happened and backed away, though quite a few lingered to watch out of curiosity. Luke hadn't actually chased for long. Now he strolled back over at an unhurried pace. The white-clad guard said, Your Highness, there is indeed something off about this man. Luke glanced at him and said, No mistake. Take him in and interrogate him. Yes. The white-clad guard immediately stepped forward and hoisted the thief up like a chicken. The thief didn't dare resist at all. There was a kind of fear called an obvious gap in strength. After searching him, they didn't find any gold coins, but they did find 2 other items. When questioned, he admitted they'd been stolen not long ago. Not far away, Lux and Kahina saw what was happening and jogged over. Staring at the thief being held, their big eyes showed some surprise, but even more confusion and disbelief. Why did he just act? In the end, Lux couldn't hold back her curiosity. Her bright eyes fixed on Luke. Your Highness, how did you know he was the thief? At that question, even the white-clad guard and the thief looked over. Even if he died, the thief wanted to die understanding why. I didn't, Luke said, still in a thoughtful daze. I just turned around and yelled once, took a few steps forward. There were tons of people behind me, but he's the only one who spun around and ran. If you're going to grab someone, who else would you grab? After that answer, all four of them fell silent. Lux and Kahina needed a couple seconds to process it. You could do that? The thief stared blankly for a few seconds, then snapped back, and he absolutely refused to believe that ridiculous reason. In that brief moment of eye contact earlier, the pressure in Luke's eyes, the thief had been stealing for years. He could tell. That was a dangerous look. Like a cat spotting a mouse. If it hadn't been, he wouldn't have chosen to run the moment Luke charged at him. You know how to interrogate people. Take him, Luke said, ignoring the thief's furious glare and gesturing for the guard to leave. Try to get a few more names out of him. If they could follow the thread and uncover a whole crew, that would be even better. And if he didn't have a crew, then at least they had someone to hand over. They might not have caught the one who stole Mrs. Yuna's purse, but they still needed to catch someone. Yes, Your Highness. The guard obeyed and took the thief away. Luke replayed that earlier sensation and became even more certain his sixth sense really was something. Truthfully, he couldn't be 100% sure the man was a thief, but in that instant their gazes met, Luke felt something off, and he trusted that feeling. He might have said it was just luck, but in reality, he'd only locked onto one person. Then he'd put on a show and tried to spook him. If the guy didn't run, Luke couldn't label him a thief without evidence. But if he did run, then there was definitely something shady going on. Whatever the truth was, once the guard dragged him off and interrogated him, it would come out. And if Luke grabbed the wrong person, not a big deal. He was a prince, someone would clean up after him. But now it looked like he'd absolutely grabbed the right one, which meant his sixth sense had been validated. So that's it. Lux watched the white-clad guard disappear. We really just caught a thief. Luke nodded. That's it. Lux blinked dumbly. But I didn't do anything. Luke understood she meant she hadn't felt involved. So he pulled out the coin pouch and explained thoughtfully, of course you did. If you hadn't provided money, the thief wouldn't have taken the bait so easily. If the amount was too small, a thief might not even bother. But this was clearly a tempting sum. And Luke had looked like a clueless country kid seeing the capital for the first time. What thief wouldn't get greedy? If that guy hadn't followed from the start, Luke wouldn't have been able to confirm him. With her own money returned, Lux felt like she actually had been useful. Fired up, she suggested excitedly, then should we use this chance to catch a few more? This time I'll do it. Sure, there was a bit of justice in it, but mostly it was her playful side. She'd realized this was kind of fun, and she wanted to copy Luke and randomly scare a few thieves. One is enough. What kind of idiot thief shows up every day just to let you catch them? Luke rejected the idea, looking at her sparkling eyes. There'd already been a commotion. If there were accomplices in that crowd, the news was probably already spreading. The same trick wouldn't hook anyone now. Besides, this only worked because it was Luke. Forget his accurate sixth sense for locking onto a target. Lux was famous. Miss Crownguard could walk down the street carrying 10,000 gold coins and no thief would have the nerves to mess with her. Alright, Lux pouted, but catching one was still satisfying. Then she said, let's go find Mrs. Yuna. Yeah, Luke replied, returning Kahina's share of the money too. He'd give the rest back to the guard tonight. Kahina took the money, secretly studying Luke. She could tell it wasn't as simple as he'd made it sound. Lux was straightforward. People said something and she believed it. But if you actually thought about it, a thief's nerves wouldn't be that bad. No way he'd panic and bolt just from being scared. This prince definitely used some other method, they just couldn't perceive it. It seemed Dimash's new prince wasn't simple at all. The three went back and found Mrs. Yuna, telling her what happened. They had caught a thief, but they couldn't confirm whether he was the one who stole her purse. Mrs. Yuna thanked them over and over. She knew they'd done everything they could. Truthfully, once she'd realized the money was stolen, she hadn't dared hope she'd get it back. Because her daughter Lola's medicine couldn't wait, Kahina paid out of her own pocket to cover it first. Mrs. Yuna cried and kept promising she would find a way to repay her someday. That was the old woman's last bit of stubborn pride, and Kahina didn't say anything more. Kahina remembered visiting Lola a few days ago with the Illuminators. They'd offered to bring Lola to the church to be cared for. There were free rooms and food there. But Mrs. Yuna had refused. She'd said that as long as she still had hands and feet, still had the ability to raise her daughter, she couldn't take a chance to be helped away from someone else who needed it more. Worried, Kahina declined Lux's suggestion to go together and decided to accompany Mrs. Yuna to buy the medicine. Your Highness, I'm very happy to have met you today. Goodbye, Kahina said politely to Luke before leaving. Luke said, me too. Goodbye. // To thank everyone for the power stones this week, I'll be uploading a bunch of chapters today. Thank you so much. 31, Chapter 31, People Can Be This Devious. After parting ways with Kahina, Luke and Lux wandered around outside until the sky began to darken, and by the time evening drew near, they'd seen plenty of interesting things along the way. Don't let Miss Crownguard's small frame fool you when it comes to shopping, her energy is absurdly abundant. Because of Lady Agatha's invitation that afternoon, Luke was going to mooch dinner at House Crownguard tonight. Seeing it was already evening, the two of them returned to the Crownguard estate. After enduring the afternoon heat, a splash of cold water to the face made everything feel instantly fresher. I've already had them start preparing dinner. It'll be ready soon, Agatha said with a smile when she saw the two of them back. Luke nodded. After drying his face, he sat down in the living room. In front of the sofa was a reception table. On it sat a small bookshelf with a few books arranged neatly. Bored, Luke casually picked one up and started flipping through it. Meanwhile, Lux carried over a pot of chilled tea, poured Luke a cup first, then poured one for herself. She sat across from him, cupping the tea in both hands, taking small sips. Not doing anything else, just drinking tea with complete focus. Wait, that's not right. After Luke had read a few pages, he suddenly heard an excited, startled voice from across the table. He set the book down and saw Lux staring at him with her big eyes, a hint of suspicion finally appearing on her face. How could that thief run just because you scared him a little? If he doesn't even have that much nerve, why would he come out to steal in the first place? Luke couldn't help laughing. You're still thinking about that? Miss Crownguard's reaction time was a little long, but at least she'd caught up. She'd clearly picked up on how he'd brushed it off earlier. You're definitely hiding something and refusing to say it. Lux's little face was dead serious, as if she'd solved the case. Luke said, because even if I told you, you might not believe it. So I figured I'd just say a couple random things. Say it anyway. What if I believe you? Lux was suddenly extremely interested, her eyes bright with curiosity. Luke didn't mind humoring her, so he put on a mysterious expression. Do you know a term called the sixth sense? What's that? Lux perked up, ready to listen carefully. You can understand it as intuition, but intuition doesn't fully cover it. Luke thought about how to describe it, then continued. A normal person's senses include hearing, sight, smell, touch, and taste, 5 senses. But beyond that, there's actually another one, a sixth sense, sometimes called heart sense. Now, intuition was something Lux understood, but this heart sense was something she'd never heard of. Of course, Luke added, ordinary people usually can't grasp it. Hearing that, Lux immediately asked, then how did you grasp it? It's a talent I was born with. Luke said, showing off. Lux gave him a skeptical little look, clearly not buying it. Luke said, then I'll let you feel it. Lean your head closer. Don't move around. Driven by curiosity, Lux did as he said and leaned forward a little. Then she watched as Luke slowly raised 2 fingers and told her, close your eyes. Lux obediently closed her eyes. Very quickly, she felt a strange, tingling itch at the center of her forehead. She couldn't help opening her eyes only to find Luke's fingers weren't actually touching her. They were hovering about a centimeter away. And even with her eyes open, the sensation didn't disappear. Luke smiled. Can you feel something? Lux nodded, then asked blankly, why does that happen? That's the sixth sense. Luke pulled his hand back and said, a sense beyond the 5. My hand isn't touching your forehead, but you can still vaguely feel something. And people with a strong sixth sense can perceive things even more sharply than that. Because the more he explained, the more believable he sounded. Lux couldn't help but believe him, though it still felt a little mystical. Seeing she still looked a bit lost, Luke decided to offer an even simpler method. Actually, there's another trick that can test your sixth sense. Want to try? Yes, yes. Lux nodded like a pecking chick. Luke said, then do exactly what I tell you. Okay. Lux nodded again. Luke continued, pick up the teacup on the table, then walk 5 steps to the left. Lux didn't doubt him. She picked up the cup on the table and walked 5 steps to the left, as instructed, stopping in the middle of the living room. And then close your eyes, and let go. Luke guided her patiently. He truly hadn't expected Miss Crownguard to be this obedient. The moment his words fell, there came a crisp, pleasantly sharp crack splash. Chilled tea scattered across the floor, and the expensive-looking teacup shattered into pieces. Lux's eyes flew open, her little face turning pale. I suddenly have a really bad feeling about this. Luke nodded solemnly. That's your sixth sense. Luxina. Before Lux could say anything, a furious roar exploded behind her. What did you do to my beloved teacup? Why you I. Lux's small frame started trembling. She stared at Luke, who was trying not to look in disbelief. She finally realized it. She'd been set up. So people could be this cruel. Damn it, if you do this, how am I supposed to believe the world is a good place? Lux felt a chill up her spine and couldn't help turning around. There stood Lady Agatha, hair practically standing on end, marching forward with a feather duster in hand. With every step, her killing intent spilled into the air. She looked at her daughter in the living room and sneered. I'm gone for a few minutes, and you start causing trouble again, huh? My dear mother, if I said this was a misunderstanding, would you believe me? Lux made a weak, pitiful face. What do you think? Agatha smiled kindly. Lux didn't hesitate. She spun around and bolted. Run. Let's see where you can run to. Agatha's elegant noble aura vanished completely. Her rage shot straight to the ceiling, and she stopped caring about appearances, chasing Lux all around the hall. And Luke, the mastermind behind it all, sipped his chilled tea and pretended he didn't exist. Mom, spare me. I'm testing the sixth sense. The sixth sense, you know, hearing, sight. Lux tried to defend herself while running, clutching her head, her mouth not stopping for even a second. I don't care what nonsense you're babbling. Either way, today only one of us is walking out of this standing. Agatha grit her teeth. Seeing she couldn't catch up right away, she simply flung the feather duster like a projectile. Lux reflexively dodged to the right, and the feather duster flew past where she'd been, clattering to the floor. Seeing that, Lucu had witnessed the whole thing blinked. She really might have a sixth sense sharper than most. Lux froze too. She stopped, eyes shining as she stared at the feather duster on the ground. She turned back, excitement written all over her face. Did you see that, Mom? The sixth sense. That was the sixth sense. Agatha hadn't seen any sixth sense. She only saw a brazen blonde brat openly challenging her authority. As her mother's tall figure drew closer and closer, Lux's posture shrank smaller and smaller, her voice dropping lower and lower, until a scream from the depths of Miss Crownguard's soul echoed into the sky. Luke, as if he'd heard absolutely nothing, set down his teacup, sniffed the scent of food in the air, and muttered, "Time to eat." 32 Chapter 32 Couldn't you just give me more all at once? 32 Chapter 32 Couldn't you just give me more all at once? After a pleasant dinner, Luke left the Crownguard estate under Miss Crownguard's resentful, lingering stare. Then he climbed into the carriage Agatha had arranged and rode all the way back to the royal palace. Jarvan III already knew Luke would be dining with House Crownguard, so he hadn't waited for him at dinner. After Luke returned, they exchanged a few words, and the king reminded him to rest well. Once Luke got back to his quarters, he washed up and prepared to sleep. A lot had happened today, and overall, it had been a pretty good experience. Lying in bed, with moonlight spilling in through the window, he drifted off not long after. At the same time, in Xin Zhao's room, all the white-clad guards from earlier were gathered there, and the familiar-looking bodyguard was reporting Luke's entire day step by step. Xin Zhao listened while sipping hot tea. Not long after His Highness left the palace this morning, he attracted a group of thieves who tailed him. But somehow, His Highness noticed them and lured them all into an alley, then handed them over to us to deal with. At midday, His Highness went to a noble restaurant for lunch. However, because he didn't bring money, he found this subordinate and took 10 gold. As he said that, the white-clad bodyguard looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, but he still forced himself to continue just speeding past that part as quickly as possible. Xin Zhao, however, picked up on it immediately and gave him a surprised look. "He found you. How did he find you?" "According to His Highness it was pure luck." The bodyguard gave a bitter smile and continued. After lunch, His Highness seemed to notice something interesting and then found a swordsmanship training camp. Entry required buying a mask, and he was short on money again, so he found this subordinate a second time and took 5 gold. Xin Zhao lifted his eyes and looked at the bodyguard again. The bodyguard didn't quite dare meet his gaze as he hurried on. After leaving the swordsmanship training camp, His Highness remembered he should give Miss Crownguard a thank you gift. Third time short on money, he found this subordinate again and took 1 gold. The more he spoke, the lower his head dipped. Xin Zhao set his teacup down and couldn't help saying, "Couldn't you have just given him more at once? This kid, why is he so honest? He asks for an amount and you hand over exactly that amount." So when His Highness found this subordinate the 4th time, he directly took all the money on this subordinate, 40 gold in total. The bodyguard practically couldn't lift his head anymore. He hadn't expected to be this unlucky. And after they got back, he was the one who had to report it. Was this a report? This was a full-blown public execution. The other white-clad guards around them were all on the verge of losing it. Xin Zhao was here, so they wanted to laugh, but didn't dare. Xin Zhao's expression turned strange after hearing it all. He sighed with emotion. "I have to say, His Highness had a pretty eventful day. For one person to go out for a day and run into that much, it wasn't easy." At that, the bodyguard seemed to recall something and said, "Seneschal, this subordinate feels His Highness may have an unusual talent. His perception is extremely sharp." He wasn't saying this to excuse the fact that he'd been found 4 times in a row. He genuinely felt His Highness was not ordinary. "I can tell," Xin Zhao said, gazing at the still surface of tea in his cup, thoughtful. "Looks like after surviving at the bottom for so many years, His Highness has some real ability. Perhaps His Majesty's worry for him is unnecessary." In Xin Zhao's view, it was a good thing for His Highness to have secrets. It meant Jarvan III would have less to worry about. And those secrets were not something Xin Zhao had any need to investigate. No matter what, Luke was Dimasha's second prince. Investigating would be overstepping. "Alright, that's enough. I've got a general picture." Xin Zhao slowly stood and said, "As for the money you fronted, go collect reimbursement from the treasurer." "Yes." The bodyguard answered immediately. "And one more thing," Xin Zhao added, raising a hand to pat the bodyguard's shoulder. His tone grew heavier. "Train your stealth properly too. Don't embarrass the royal guard." The bodyguard's face went awkward. He nodded again. "Yes." The next day, by late morning, Luke was woken by a knock at the door. Sunlight poured through the window and warmed the bed. He sat up, yawned, then rolled out of bed. After getting dressed, he went downstairs and opened the door. "Your Highness, His Majesty was worried you'd wake too late and miss breakfast, so he had me bring it to you." A servant stood outside pushing a small cart with several breakfast dishes on it. "Is that so?" "Thank you," Luke said, stepping aside and offering his thanks. "It's my duty." The servant smiled, pushed the cart into the sitting room, arranged everything, then said respectfully, "When you're finished, call for me. I'll wait at the door." With that, he withdrew. Luke sat on the sofa, breathing in the aroma rising from the food, appetite surging instantly. Sleep as long as you want. Wake up and someone brings you delicious breakfast. Wasn't this exactly the life Luke had always dreamed of? In a good mood, he finished breakfast, called the servant in to clean up, then got up to go pay his respects to Jarvan III. It was basic etiquette, he couldn't neglect it. He chatted with his kingly father for a while, then used "I don't want to delay your work" as an excuse and slipped away again. Back on the sofa, he lay there thinking about whether he should go out today. After thinking for a bit, he decided to forget it. Going out alone without that blonde girl, it felt like there was less fun in it. Besides, Luke wasn't planning to see Miss Crownguard for the next few days. As for the reason, check-in. Remembering another day had passed, Luke opened the system interface and selected today's check-in. Congratulations to the host for obtaining movement skill, Gecko Wallcrawl LV3. Congratulations to the host for obtaining rare exotic fruit, odd flavor fruit *1. Skill detected, Gecko Wallcrawl. Learn. Today's check-in only popped 2 notifications before ending. But it was just a normal daily check-in, so the rewards naturally couldn't compare to yesterday's. Luke hadn't been expecting much. Still, he'd gained another skill. Looking at the prompt, he chose to learn it. In an instant, a strange sensation washed through his body, especially gathering in his lower half, as if it were strengthening him bit by bit. A flood of experience appeared in his mind. After a while, the sensation faded. A movement skill, huh? Luke stood up thoughtfully. He'd heard that if Gecko Wallcrawl was mastered to the highest level, you could run along walls like a gecko as if walking on flat ground, absurdly powerful. And it also strengthened his footwork to a certain extent. He tested it inside the room with a few nimble leaps, and he really did feel lighter than yesterday. Not because his weight had changed, because of Gecko Wallcrawl's effect. 33, Chapter 33. Not many tough ones. His level was still too low, and Luke wasn't interested in experimenting further. It wasn't like lightness skills where you could leap around rooftops and fly over walls. So he sat back down on the sofa and opened the system inventory. He took out the odd flavor fruit stored inside. It was about the size of an apple, glossy red all over, with a cherry-like look to it. It actually looked pretty appetizing. Luke opened his mouth and took a big bite. Juice and sweetness burst across his tongue, surprisingly delicious. Before long, a new system notification appeared. Congratulations, host, aptitude +1. So this rare exotic fruit could improve aptitude. That meant it was good stuff. Luke chewed on the odd flavor fruit like it was an apple. It only had a tiny pit, and after he finished the whole thing, his aptitude had increased by 2 points. As for what it felt like after aptitude increased, honestly, he didn't feel much. But besides that, Luke also felt warmth spreading through his body, like he was still digesting another effect from the fruit. His constitution had improved a little too. Knock, knock, knock. Not long after he finished and lay down for a moment, there was another knock at the door. He got up and opened it. This time, Xin Zhao was standing outside. "Zhao, what's up?" After asking, Luke noticed there were 2 people behind Xin Zhao, an elderly woman and a middle-aged woman. "Greetings, Your Highness." The 2 of them bowed in unison when they saw Luke. "No need for that. Zhao, they're royal tailors," Xin Zhao explained. "They're here to take your measurements." As he spoke, his gaze couldn't help lingering on Luke's face for a couple extra seconds. "Is there something on my face?" Luke noticed and rubbed his cheek, confused. "It's nothing," Xin Zhao said. "It just looks like your skin's gotten a lot better." He still remembered the first time he met Luke. Luke had already been striking back then, but it wasn't hard to tell his skin had been in poor condition. If you touched it, it would have felt rough. That much was easy to understand, considering the environment Luke grew up in and the nutrition he'd lacked. But it had only been a day or so, and Xin Zhao was surprised to see Luke's complexion looking noticeably better than before. "Maybe palace food is good for you," Luke said with a smile, tossing out a convenient excuse. In his head, he figured it was probably the odd flavor fruit. Luke had never cared much about looks anyway. In his opinion, Runeterra didn't exactly have many people who could compete with him. Enough about that. Xin Zhao didn't dig deeper. He led the 2 tailors inside and said, "Your Highness, stand still and cooperate with them." "All right." Luke nodded, only then realizing were they making him some kind of outfit. They'd even brought in 2 royal tailors. As if he'd read Luke's thoughts, Xin Zhao smiled and explained, "The discussion results between His Majesty and the ministers came out yesterday. They've decided that 3 days from now, they'll summon the people of the capital and publicly announce your identity, formally granting you the crown of a prince. For you, that day is important. Your attire has to be ceremonial and dignified." "So that's what it is." Luke understood immediately. 3 days from now, that fast. He hadn't even mentally prepared. Which meant in 3 days, the entire capital would know their kingdom had a second prince. His kingly father really was decisive. Luke didn't know what had been said in yesterday's meeting, but he could imagine plenty of nobles and ministers had been shocked then, just like 18 years ago. Some of them would have opposed it. Setting the date only 3 days away was enough to show Jarvan III's determination this time. Thinking back to how Jarvan III had dominated the hall yesterday, Xin Zhao couldn't help feeling a little emotional. He hadn't seen Jarvan III radiate that kind of presence in a long time. Back then, not a single noble or minister in the chamber dared to speak. Ever since Jarvan III stopped leading campaigns personally, he'd played the benevolent ruler the world wanted to see. Yesterday, it felt like he'd become himself again, like he'd become a father again. And yet, even after all these years, there were still so many people who opposed it. Watching Luke cooperate with the tailors, Xin Zhao's eyes flickered. Demacia wasn't as calm as it looked on the surface. Jarvan III was holding it down, and nobody dared reveal their true colors. No matter what, he just hoped they wouldn't drag Luke into that whirlpool. After they finished taking Luke's measurements, the two tailors left. Now they had to work fast, only 3 days. If they failed to finish the outfit in time, it could cost them their livelihoods. Xin Zhao didn't leave. He still had things to do. For the next 3 days, he would be responsible for teaching Luke certain noble etiquette. Luke had to learn all of it from scratch. Looks like the next 3 days wouldn't be quiet either. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Those 3 days, the capital was unbelievably lively. News leaking out from the palace spread through every street. And later, when Jarvan III personally summoned the citizens, it all but confirmed the news was real. Demacia's second prince had appeared. The news practically detonated the entire capital. No one expected that 22 years had passed since the day Jarvan IV was born, and now, 22 years later, Demacia had gained another prince. Everyone was intensely curious. Soon, another story began circulating through the capital, one that explained the origins of the second prince. It was the tale of Jarvan III's campaign long ago, and the love and tragedy entwined within it. People gossiped everywhere, and this was the king's gossip of all things, so for days the streets were full of people talking about it. There were even traveling bards turning it into short stories and performing it aloud. It had to be said, it was a very successful bit of publicity. Even though most had never seen Demacia's second queen, after hearing the story, people still felt genuine warmth and admiration for that kind and brave woman. And because of that, they grew even more curious about the unseen second prince. At the same time, people began debating Jarvan III's 2 great romances. Most felt what Jarvan III did couldn't be cleanly judged as right or wrong because one day, in the future, you can suddenly fall in love with someone, and that isn't something you can predict or prevent. A smaller number argued that what Jarvan III did later was a betrayal of the late Queen Catherine Ireland. Those voices were expected. Before this, Jarvan III had already prepared himself. The arguments had raged for 3 days, and they were destined to spread for a long time across all of Demacia, and even farther across Runeterra. And today, that new prince was about to appear before everyone. Whether they supported him or opposed him, everyone would gather at the Grand Plaza. 34, Chapter 34, Festival, Ceremony. Morning came, bright sunlight spreading across the land. On the streets of the capital, pedestrians were rare. And whenever a few figures did appear, they were hurrying in the same direction. I slept way too hard this morning. Has it started over there yet? No, but it's about to. Move faster. Wait for me. This is all your fault for getting up so late. We won't get a good spot anymore. I don't even know if we'll be able to see what this second prince looks like. And at the same time, on the other side of the capital, the Grand Plaza. This place covered an enormous area and could hold a staggering number of people. Whenever the capital had something important, this was where citizens were gathered and announcements were made. As far as the eye could see, it was a sea of people. If you borrowed the viewpoint of the dragon bird riders circling in the sky above, the crowd on the ground would look like a dense swarm of ants. Even for a summer morning, nobody felt hot. The entire plaza buzzed with conversation. A few vendors with small wooden boxes strapped to their chests moved through the crowd, calling out as they went. Along both sides of the plaza stood a long line of knights in white armor like silver walls, standing perfectly straight, spears in hand, stern eyes sweeping the scene as they maintained order. In the center of the plaza was a long corridor that connected to a castle at the far end. A high platform jutted out from the castle, and atop it sat a throne still empty for now. I wonder what the second prince looks like. I heard he's broad-shouldered and thick-waisted, taller than most people. I heard he's skinny as a stick. He grew up poor. How would he have the nutrition to become some big brute? Hey, maybe he's just ordinary. Everyone knew what day it was. The way they talked brimmed with curiosity, their imaginations running wild about this unseen new prince. Whoom! Right then, a deep bell hum rolled out from the high platform. The sound wave swept across the Grand Plaza all the way to its very edge. In that instant, everyone in the plaza, no matter what they were doing, lifted their heads in unison and looked toward the castle. The next second, the crowd erupted into thunderous cheers. Your Majesty, Jarvan III. Long live the king. Demacia, forever. On the viewing platform, Jarvan III appeared in full regalia, his crown upon his head, a golden robe draped over his shoulders, a ruby scepter held in his hand. Several ministers followed behind him. Roy and Tiana were among them. Jarvan IV stood slightly behind to the left. Once Jarvan III seated himself upon the throne, Roy stepped forward. He wore a solemn grey and white robe, his expression dignified and severe as he spoke. In Demacian year 661, His Majesty Jarvan III's second son was lost among the common folk. Now, in Dimation year 679, the second prince has returned. For this reason, the citizens are gathered here, and this is announced with full ceremony worthy of celebration. His voice wasn't loud, yet through the golden amplifying horns on both sides, it carried across the air above Dawn Castle. The moment he finished speaking, a cannon blast thundered into the bright day, followed by dignified drums, then a grand, ceremonial accompaniment. The atmosphere in the plaza instantly turned festive, lively like a great rite. Look! Nobody knew who saw it first. But the crowd's gaze snapped as one to the start of the corridor, where a lone figure slowly climbed the steps. A cloak-like outer mantle in gold and silver draped over him, while his main attire was an elegant white ceremonial outfit. He looked every bit the part, imposing and refined. On his chest was the light shield crest, and above that, a handsome, clean-cut face, sharp lines, defined features, brows like blades and eyes like stars, memorable at first glance. His build wasn't bulky, but he wasn't short or frail either. With a perfectly balanced frame, he walked down the corridor at an unhurried pace, carrying himself with unmistakable presence. This was the rumored second prince. Neither ordinary, nor plain. Even though Luke had prepared himself for this moment, the instant he stepped onto the corridor and saw that dense black mass of people stretching farther and farther into the distance, pressure still rose in his chest. There were too many more people than he'd seen in his entire life. No one knew how many had come from the capital. Nearly every gaze was locked onto him. If he made a fool of himself now, he'd never be able to hold his head up again. So he walked carefully, step by step. The noise in his ears was a chaotic roar. He couldn't even make out what people were saying. A corridor that normally took a few minutes to cross took him a full half-hour. Xin Zhao had instructed it that way. Luke needed the citizens to remember his face. Finally, he entered the castle. Someone was already waiting for him there, a tall figure. "Brother," Luke said. Jarvan IV smiled and stepped forward, lifting a hand to pat Luke's shoulders lightly. "Nervous?" "A little," Luke admitted honestly. "It'll get easier. Right now, you've got way more pressure than I ever did." Jarvan IV guided him forward, smiling as he spoke. "The first time father dragged me down that corridor, I was only 4. I didn't understand a thing. It was early as hell, I was half asleep, and they basically hauled me up there. By the time I finally realized what was happening, I was already used to it." He teased his younger self on purpose, trying to ease Luke's nerves. Luke pictured that scene and couldn't help laughing too. "In a moment you'll feel it again, but it's nothing major," Jarvan IV said, and by then they'd already reached the second level. From here, you could see the back of the throne and a great many people. Everyone standing inside was among the highest-ranking figures in Dimation. The instant Luke walked in, every single gaze converged on him. There were familiar faces, and unfamiliar ones. Agatha was there as well. She offered Luke a faint smile. "Your Highness, please," someone signaled, reminding Luke he didn't have time to stand there daydreaming. Luke stepped forward. He understood the procedure well enough. He walked 2 more steps, then turned to face Jarvan III. At the foot of the throne platform, Luke dropped to one knee. In Jarvan III's hands was a platinum-white crown. The king rose, placed it gently upon Luke's head, and his eyes were filled with warmth and tenderness. Then Jarvan III sat back down. Luke stood, turned, and faced the outside. Still that endless, tightly packed crowd filling the grand plaza, deafeningly lively, the air boiling with voices. Roy spoke at just the right moment. "Luke Lightshield Ivof, true royal blood today, in Dimation year 679, is crowned with the prince's crown. This is worthy of celebration." As his words fell, the plaza below erupted into a roar so fierce it seemed to pierce the clouds. Standing on the viewing platform, Luke looked down and saw golden sunlight spread across every face. In their eyes, it was as if his silhouette was reflected there. Those faces were all smiling. Countless people celebrated from the heart, welcoming Dimasha's second prince home. And in that moment, a nameless emotion inside Luke quietly expanded larger and larger. 35, Chapter 35, It's Falling Apart. 35, Chapter 35, It's Falling Apart. The celebration lasted a full 2 hours, so even after it ended, the entire capital felt even livelier than usual. And for Luke, today's busy schedule was only just beginning. He had barely returned to the Citadel of Dawn. He hadn't even had time to sit down and drink a couple sips of water before nobles started coming in to greet him, introducing themselves and presenting congratulatory gifts. Xin Zhao had told him this was a required part of the process. Luke needed to remember these nobles, and they needed to remember him. No sooner had the first noble left than the next one walked in. And every single one of them had to be received by Luke personally. He was basically a living prop. At first he could still smile, but eventually his smile went numb, and he repeated the same routine over and over like a machine. "Someone tell me, exactly how many nobles does this capital even have?" Finally, the Meet the Nobles segment ended and there was still more to do, the evening banquet. The banquet was hosted by Jarvan III and attended by many nobles. The location was the Citadel of Dawn itself, and the purpose was obvious, to celebrate Luke. So as the centerpiece of the night, he had to appear. But at least this part was less of a headache than the afternoon, because he'd already met the nobles he needed to meet. They called it a banquet for Luke, but really it was just the adults switching rooms so they could keep talking business somewhere nicer. "Your Highness, are you ready?" someone came to urge before it began. "Yeah." Luke straightened his outfit. He was still wearing the same clothes from the morning, and the prince's crown had already been put away. Jarvan IV had said there was no need to wear that thing all day. His own had been sitting at home collecting dust. Besides, even without it, in Demasha nobody would ever forget who he was. Following the servant who came to fetch him, Luke headed to the banquet hall. His job was a short speech before things started. Once he said a few words, he could basically do whatever he wanted as long as he didn't leave. When he arrived, the room was brightly lit. The banquet spread was already fully prepared, lavish dishes laid out like a buffet, with an entire section devoted to desserts. Drinks were arranged in 2 separate areas, and there was even a vintage gramophone playing relaxed music. All the guests had already arrived, waiting for the main character to enter, every noble dressed in formal attire. Luke pushed the door open, and his sharp look immediately drew countless eyes. With everyone's attention snapping to him, the gramophone music stopped at just the right moment. "Welcome, everyone. You're all respectable people, so there's no point in me rambling. I'll say just one thing: enjoy tonight's banquet." Xin Zhao had prepared a full script for his entrance, but it was long. Later, seeing how Luke had been dragged around all afternoon, Xin Zhao told him it wouldn't matter if he didn't follow a script at all. So Luke improvised. He couldn't be bothered with fluff. He said 2 quick lines, and the gramophone started up again. The nobles snapped out of it, offered some polite applause, and didn't make a big deal out of it. The atmosphere stayed cheerful. After all, Luke was the star tonight. "Father." Luke walked over to Jarvan III and offered a respectful bow. Jarvan III was speaking with Roy. Seeing Luke, he smiled and said, "Go have fun. Don't worry about anyone else." "All right." Luke nodded and walked away. The tightness in his body finally loosened. Then he saw a tall man approaching, white hair, white beard, clearly past 50, yet still straight-backed and broad in presence. Luke bowed again. "Uncle Barrett." This was Barrett Baveli Kahina's father, and Jarvan III's close friend. A couple days ago, Jarvan III had already introduced Luke to him. "Good kid," Barrett said with a booming laugh, teasing him. "Looks like today wore you out pretty bad." Luke smiled helplessly. "I won't keep you," Barrett went on. "You know Kahina, right? She won't be able to come for a while. But your uncle brought you a gift today, hope you enjoy yourself." He left that cryptic line behind and walked off. Luke was curious, but he didn't chase him down to ask. Right now, he just wanted to find a place to sit and rest. He wasn't interested in heavy food, so he set his sights on the dessert section. Dessert was one of his hobbies, after all. But the moment he got there, he ran straight into the person he couldn't avoid. The instant Luke arrived, his eyes met the gaze of a blonde girl holding a plate with a slice of cake on it. The second their eyes connected, Miss Crownguard snorted and turned her head away. Still mad. Luke sat down in a nearby chair. Lux looked especially stunning tonight, delicate and elegant, like a princess. "Mad? What are you talking about? The word mad isn't even in my dictionary," Lux said, turning back with a fake sweet smile. The very next second, her fork viciously stabbed into the cake. Ahem. Looking at the cake's miserable condition, Luke cleared his throat. "About last time I was wrong. I really wanted to apologize, but these past few days have been so busy I couldn't spare a second. See, the moment I had time tonight, I came straight to you." Because of him, Miss Crownguard had gotten smacked for no reason. To be honest, if he had to quantify his guilt, there was a little. But after that first moment, the idea of apologizing had vanished completely. Still, looking at Lux like this, if he didn't say something, there was no way she was letting this go. "Really?" Lux turned back, her little eyes full of suspicion despite how earnest he sounded. "Really," Luke said, nodding with absolute seriousness. "Still not good enough?" Lux wavered for a split second, but the memory of that day hit her again, and her tone turned firm. "The trust between you and me is just like that Cupid shattered into pieces." After saying that, she snorted again, lifted her fork, and stuffed nearly half the cake into her mouth in one bite. "But I didn't even lie to you," Luke defended himself. "Did you or did you not end up discovering the sixth sense? You had better ways to test it." Lux gritted her teeth. This time Luke had nothing to say. Looks like Miss Crownguard's anger wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, so he stopped bothering her and let her enjoy her cake in peace. He grabbed a plate too, picked a cake that looked especially good, and started eating leisurely. The two of them sat there less than a meter apart, not talking, just eating like their lives depended on it. Before long, it turned into a silent competition. Lux realized this jerk was eating faster than she was without her noticing. He'd already eaten one more slice than her. When it came to cake, she had never admitted defeat to anyone. No way she could tolerate that. She immediately sped up. Luke had been eating just fine, but when he saw her start grabbing with her hands like she was raiding a battlefield, he worried there wouldn't be enough left for him, so he sped up too. And just like that, the desserts in the dessert section began disappearing at an alarming rate. The two of them ate pastries with the intensity of people taking down a full dinner. 36, Chapter 36, I don't get it, but it sounds impressive. 36, Chapter 36, I don't get it, but it sounds impressive. What are you two doing? When Kahina found Lux, she saw her sprawled against the back of a chair, staring blankly at the ceiling like her soul had left her body. And Luke wasn't doing much better either, slumped in his chair, looking like he was contemplating the meaning of life. The only thing that looked truly alive was the battlefield on the dessert table, its traces loudly proclaiming just how brutal the carnage here had been. After some deduction, Kahina concluded these two had simply eaten themselves stupid. I suggest a ceasefire. Lux weakly raised a hand. She really couldn't take another bite. So this whole time you were having a competition. Luke sat up and glared at the little blonde across from him. He knew it, no wonder she kept snatching the ones he liked. Humph. And whose fault is it you kept stealing the desserts I like? Lux huffed, loudly expressing her dissatisfaction. Luke actually laughed in disbelief. Nice try playing the victim first. You're the one who kept stealing. The two looked ready to start bickering for real. Kahina, who'd been watching for ages, quietly added, has it ever occurred to you that maybe you both like the same kind? Both of them fell silent at the same time. That did seem possible. So that's what it was. Then it must be my fault, Miss Crown Guard. Since you like this dessert, please go ahead. Luke had a sudden realization, then warmly picked up a plate, took a portion of the dessert he liked, and personally set it in front of Lux. After eating that much already, one more bite would surely finish off this little blondie, right? No, no, no. I misunderstood your highness at the start. You're the star today, you should eat first. Lux pasted on a fake smile and pushed the plate back toward Luke. She was thinking the exact same thing. Watching them politely shove the plate back and forth again, Kahina sat down speechlessly and cut in with her hand, stopping their little performance. Forget it. I'll eat it. Spell interrupted. The two of them finally settled down. Did you two argue? Why does it feel like you're at each other's throats? Kahina picked up on it immediately and said it out loud. The moment she heard that, Lux got fired up. Who's at whose throat? He's the one who's been targeting me. You're here, judge for yourself. Then Miss Crown Guard, righteous indignation and all, recounted what happened last time. Kahina ate dessert while nodding along, occasionally cooperating with a perfectly timed "that's outrageous," fully embodying what it meant to be a bestie. Tell me, wasn't that too much? I'm even starting to suspect that so-called sixth sense was just something he made up to fool me. Lux slammed her small hand on the table as she vented her anger. After listening, Kahina thought for 2 seconds and replied, I don't think His Highness was lying to you. In the military, this kind of thing is usually called spiritual awareness. It means that in certain moments, you instinctively become extremely sensitive to danger and may even react in advance. So that's how it is. Lux nodded in sudden understanding, lifting her pale chin and looking at Luke with a proud little attitude. Fine, then. I'll forgive you reluctantly. In truth, she hadn't been all that angry. How could the open-minded Miss Crown Guard be that petty? She was just quietly planning how to get revenge later, that's all. Wow. I'm deeply grateful for Miss Crown Guard's boundless mercy, Luke replied, taking a sip of a drink he'd casually grabbed off a tray as a servant passed by, his tone not exactly enthusiastic. By the way, how do you know that? Lux turned to Kahina again, curious. I read it in a book. And thinking about it, calling it a sixth sense does fit pretty well. Kahina remembered how Lux had explained the sixth sense sees the sixth human sense, something everyone had. So last time, His Highness used that sixth sense to catch the thief. She lifted her eyes and glanced at Luke as he drank. Compared to last time, he seemed more refined somehow, and his skin looked unbelievably good. The change was bigger than she'd expected. But that wasn't the point right now. From what Kahina understood, the requirements to develop spiritual awareness were extremely harsh. This wasn't a skill just anyone could pick up, let alone using it to detect a thief who was merely tailing them from behind. That could only mean one thing: His Highness's sixth sense had grown so strong it had reached a level ordinary people could never touch. Then why couldn't I do it again afterward, no matter how I tried? Lux asked in confusion. That was the question she'd been obsessing over these past few days. For days, she'd had her family servants cooperate, she'd turn her back, and they'd throw pillows at random to test her sixth sense. But no matter how many times she tried, she never succeeded. Luke glanced at her. You think it's that easy to train? Then is there really no other way? Lux asked unwillingly. Miss Crown Guard seemed oddly determined about this. Luke couldn't help asking why. Why are you so obsessed with this? Obviously because Lux looked toward Agatha in the distance, who was chatting and smiling with other noble women, and sighed faintly. She walks like she makes no sound at all. She always just suddenly appears, especially when I'm slacking off in my room. I always get caught. But if I master the sixth sense, that won't happen anymore. As she spoke, Lux clenched her fist. Seeing how serious she was, Luke thought for a moment, then said, actually there is a method. Instantly, both Lux and Kahina looked at him. Lux's eyes glittered as she urged, tell me, tell me. Luke cleared his throat and began. The so-called sixth sense refers to a psychological feeling of predictive inference formed when stimuli from the 5 senses are processed and reflected through some unknown cell or organ in the brain. The two girls nodded as they listened. So many technical sounding terms. They didn't understand any of it, but it sounded incredibly impressive. Even Kahinawo knew a little couldn't help listening more seriously when Luke started talking so professionally. So, there's a commonly used training method, walk while blindfolded. After he said that, he saw their puzzled expressions and explained, as everyone knows, the sixth sense is also called mind sense, and the eyes are the window to the soul. The connection between them goes without saying. Even in daily life, vision is extremely important. When you shut off visual perception, the world becomes pure darkness. That's the closest state to mind sense. If you can cover your eyes and freely walk a full lap around the main hall at home without relying on anything external, that means you're close to mastering the sixth sense. Honestly, he felt like being able to make up nonsense this smoothly was an achievement in itself. 37, Chapter 37, out of 10, 5 can't be trusted. 37, Chapter 37, out of 10, 5 can't be trusted. I get it. Lux's face lit up with sudden realization. This time, she truly understood. Hearing it explained like that, she felt like she was only one step away from mastering the sixth sense. At that moment, those big eyes of hers were filled with fighting spirit. Once she got home, she was absolutely going to try it. Kahina wasn't nearly as hyped. She felt like something was off, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. At first, it had sounded pretty reasonable. But the further it went the more it started to feel kind of unreliable. And after Lux's case study, Kahina couldn't shake the feeling that when this prince talked, 10 parts of it came with 5 parts you couldn't trust. She forced herself to calm down and decided not to think about it anymore. As for Lux, seeing how excited her best friend was, Kahina ultimately chose to stay silent. Found you, found you. A familiar voice rang out again. They looked up to see Jarvan 4 walking over with a broad smile, looking like he was in an excellent mood. Behind him was a short-haired man who wasn't any shorter than him, built solidly, with a face as sharp and steadfast as a minted coin. Handsome, too. Luke recognized him instantly. The silhouette was iconic. The might of Dimasha Garen. A real, no-nonsense Dimasian man. The moment Lux saw him, a big chunk of her excitement evaporated, and she sat back down. Let me introduce you, Jarvan 4 said warmly to Luke. This is Garen, Crown Guard, me good friend. Then he leaned in closer to Luke, smug as could be. Garen, this is my brother. Well, way more handsome than you, right? Just like last time, he really did have to show off a little. Garen ignored him completely, raising his right fist to his chest in a formal salute. Second Prince. A pleasure to meet you. Hello. Luke stood, smiling as he offered his hand. Garen lifted his head, reached out, and shook it. Alright, that's all. Just wanted you two to meet first. You keep chatting weary out. Jarvan 4 had a good sense for timing. Seeing his brother happily talking with the two girls, he pulled Garen along to leave. Before he went, Garen glanced at Lux and the faint evidence of annihilated desserts on the table in front of her, then reminded her, don't forget mother told you to eat fewer sweets. Don't be like last time. Thank you for your unnecessary concern. Goodbye. Lux cut him off immediately with a radiant smile and a swift farewell. Garen didn't say anything else. His expression remained stern and composed as ever, and he followed Jarvan 4 away. Last time? What happened last time? Luke couldn't help getting curious. Lux and Garen were siblings, but their relationship looked visibly terrible. Knowing won't do you any good. Lux picked up her silver glinting furcan invisible threat. Luke heard that and instantly knew it had to be Miss Crown Guard's embarrassing history. So he decided not to ask openly. Later, when he got the chance, he'd ask Garen in private. He loved hearing other people's embarrassing stories. Just then, the lights in the hall dimmed, with most of the illumination focusing on a single spot. Luke followed the bright pool of light and saw a blue-haired woman seated on a chair, her figure graceful and elegant. Her long blue hair fell naturally down over her full waistline, and her stunning beauty carried a poised, refined nobility. She wore a classic aqua blue dress, and in her arms was an instrument that was unmistakably Ionian in Stylian Etwal. Simply sitting there, she looked exquisitely unreal, like a fairy stepped out of a painting. Maven of the strings Sona. The hall fell quiet almost without anyone realizing it. Sona lifted a pale hand and gently placed it on the strings. The next moment, a beautiful melody flowed out. A solo performance. Yet with only that single instrument, every note seemed to land directly on each listener's heartstrings. It made people feel refreshed, at ease, and strangely weightless. Luke listened in silence. Sona's command of her music matched everything he knew on all of Runeterra. She was the kind of existence that sat at the very top. It really was incredible. So this was the gift Barrett had prepared for him. Sona was Kahina's older sister, and Barrett's daughter. In Dimasha, she was regarded as a musician whose performance was impossible to buy no matter the price. Countless people were captivated by her music. Some nobles offered fortunes just to hear her play a single piece, and still were refused. Because House Bovelli had never lacked money and every one of Sona's performances depended entirely on her mood. She didn't choose her audience. Street kids, butchers selling pork, self-important scholars, and refined artists. In her eyes, they were all the same. When the piece ended, the audience remained immersed in the afterglow of that music. It took several seconds before people slowly came back to themselves. Then applause erupted, filling the entire hall. No matter how many times I hear it, it's still unbelievably good. Lux clapped enthusiastically, sighing with emotion. Kahina smiled, genuinely happy. Every time she saw Sona praised, it made her happy. The lights returned to normal. Sona rose and walked toward Luke with light, elegant steps. When she reached them, she hugged the Etwal clothes and dipped into a slight bow, a courteous greeting. But no sound came from her lips. Because ever since she was little, Sona had been unable to speak. She was born mute. Still, Luke knew if she had a voice, it would be as moving as her music. He smiled and said, "Hello, Miss Sona." Sona lifted her head. Her eyes, like clear water, curved in a gentle smile. She signed 2 quick gestures toward Kahina. "Kahina says my sister is wishing your highness a happy day, and she'll be leaving first," Kahina translated. "Safe travels," Luke replied, seeing her off. Sona bowed lightly once more, then turned and walked away. Luke watched her retreating figure and thought that maybe he wasn't some chosen one after all. Only he knew Sona seemed to be able to speak, but no one had ever been able to hear her voice. For a split second earlier, Luke had thought maybe he could. Now it seemed he was out of luck too. "My sister doesn't like crowded places when she's not performing," Kahina explained softly. Luke nodded. If she disliked crowds, it was probably because in crowded places, there were simply too many sounds, too much noise. He turned his head, and didn't notice that Sona, nearly out of the hall, paused, turned back, and tilted her head, studying Luke's back with faint curiosity. "Right, what were we talking about again?" Lux suddenly remembered. Kahina thought for a moment. "The Sixth Sense training, I think." Lux asked, "Are you busy tomorrow?" "Tomorrow's my day off," Kahina answered. "Great. Tomorrow we meet at His Highness's place 9 in the morning." Lux decided instantly. Luke nodded and didn't refuse. He had a feeling tomorrow would be interesting. Just then, he noticed someone on the other side of the hall standing alone, giving off an unapproachable, icy elegance. The Grand Duelist Fiora. She happened to raise her head. Her cool, clear eyes met Luke's. The next moment, she only gave a small nod in greeting, then looked away again. Cold. Very cold. 38. Chapter 38. First time I've seen someone explain slacking off so clearly and elegantly. 38. Chapter 38. First time I've seen someone explain slacking off so clearly and elegantly. The next day, Luke was woken by the cicadas outside, those desperate mating cries that also meant summer was about to hit its hottest stretch. He was awake, and honestly he wanted to go right back to sleep, but the moment he rolled over, he remembered someone had said they were gathering here today. So he sat up in one motion, scratched his messy hair, and yawned. After washing up, he got dressed. The outfit the designer had painstakingly made yesterday had already been tossed into the wardrobe. Looked great, sure, but it wasn't comfortable. "Check in." He said it silently in his mind. "Congratulations, host, you have obtained Ordinary Realm Upgrade Card *1. Congratulations, host, you have obtained Ordinary Skill Upgrade Card *1. Hearing the system prompt, Luke opened his item inventory to check the descriptions. Ordinary Realm Upgrade Card. After use, realms below unyielding can be automatically increased by 1 level. Ordinary Skill Upgrade Card. After use, skills below LV5 can be automatically increased by 1 level. Good stuff. After reading it, Luke used them without hesitation. Sure, saving them for later might have made the effect better, but to Luke, that wasn't important. Getting stronger without effort felt incredible. Ordinary Realm Upgrade Card used successfully. Congratulations, host, your realm has advanced to Heroic Early Stage. Ordinary Skill Upgrade Card used successfully. Congratulations, host, your skill Wind Controlling Swordsmanship has advanced to LV4 Integrated Mastery. As the upgrade chime rang out, a familiar sensation spread through Luke's body. A warm current surged from his heart, flowing into his limbs and throughout him, unbelievably pleasant. A minute later, the warmth faded. Luke felt the difference. Right now, he could absolutely deal with 2 versions of himself from 1 minute ago easily. At the same time, with Wind Controlling Swordsmanship leveling up, new insights and experience appeared in his mind, as if he'd trained for a long time. A small boost like this didn't really move Luke. By then, he'd already left his room, heading to greet Jarvan III. After meeting Jarvan III, he even ate breakfast with him. Roy and another minister were also there, and they happened to be discussing Luke. This minister believes that since your highness is already over 18, you should not be left idle in the palace with nothing to do. Perhaps, like His Highness Jarvan IV, you should define a clear goal as early as possible. Roy clasped his hands together, speaking calmly. Jarvan IV had moved out of the palace at 18, and even then he'd already had an extremely clear goal. Simple: become stronger, become an excellent commander, and defend the nation. Now, Luke had only been back in the palace for a few days, and the ministers were already thinking about his future. Luke, eating on the other side, heard Roy say that and immediately felt this old man was pretty annoying. That's true. Jarvan III seemed to think for a moment, then looked at Luke. What goals do you have for the future? The question landed on Luke. After thinking for a second, Luke said frankly, Father, my goal is to plant a few acres of good farmland. In spring, I'll sow a handful of seeds, water them a little every day, and wait for winter to harvest. Everyone present fell silent for 2 seconds. It was the first time they'd ever seen someone describe coasting through life with such clear-headed, refined honesty. Anyone else could say that and nobody would blink. But you're a prince. Roy held his temper and asked again, does your highness have no other ambitions? Ambitions? Luke thought, then flashed a bright grin. My former ambition was to become someone above everyone else. I've already achieved it. Silence again. Roy's mouth twitched as he lifted his gaze at Luke. If your brother said that, he'd get beaten. Only you would dare say that to your father's face. Jarvan III maintained a gentle smile the entire time. A person's ambitions are endless. You simply haven't found new ambitions yet. There's plenty of time, you can think slowly. We'll leave it at that for now. Go have fun. His tolerance toward Luke was obvious to anyone watching. With just a few sentences, he brushed the matter aside. Yes, father. Luke was basically done eating. He stood, gave the ministers a slight bow, and left. Your Majesty, no matter what, Prince Luke is still a prince of the realm. You must not raise him to be too lax and idle, Roy reminded seriously. Jarvan III replied slowly, he just hasn't adapted yet. Give him more time. What only he cared about was this: the two ambitions Luke had named were both the most bottom-level goals, things an ordinary person might pursue for their entire life. Your Majesty, he's your son. Of course you see him with a halo. Someone else spoke up then, tone lightly teasing. Everyone looked over. Tiana sat in her chair, smiling. If you ask me, that boy isn't simple. Roy asked, High Marshal, what is your view on this matter? I think that boy is pretty similar to my girl. Neither of them has any definite goal for the future. They both live one day at a time. If they can be happy for a moment, then that moment is enough. As Tiana spoke, she took a sip of tea. Only after swallowing did she look at Jarvan III with a smile. The only difference is, my girl has a strict mother, while that boy has an overly doting father. That was very clearly aimed at Jarvan III. And Jarvan III only smiled, not refuting her. Tiana then turned to Roy again. When someone's status changes drastically in a short span of time, their mindset can easily change a lot as well. Trying to shape his future right now is simply too rushed. At this stage, no matter what goal he claims to have, it may not be real. My view is, free range. After Tiana finished, Roy asked, what do you mean by free range? Tiana said, it means you manage the big things and don't micromanage the small ones. Life-defining matters must be managed. Trivial matters don't need to be. With Luke's status, what counted as big or small would still need careful consideration. But Tiana's meaning was already clear. She wasn't saying Luke should be neglected. A nobody gaining the greatest power in the shortest time, what kind of mindset change could that cause? Only asking Luke himself would give the clearest answer, but the people present could very easily imagine the worst. That was the kind of big thing that had to be managed. Jarvan III's gaze flickered. He'd considered all of this too. But because of the guilt in his heart, the king's strictness still lost to the father's compassion. Smiling, Jarvan III said, just say it all at once. I can tell you already have an idea. It's not really an idea. Tiana stood and offered her suggestion. But he's young. If he stays idle like this, sooner or later he'll become useless. My recommendation is, stuff him into the academy. Let him study for a year first. After a year, we'll see the results. During that time, I'll also keep an eye on him for you, Your Majesty. 39, Chapter 39, all those wall smashes were for nothing. Tiana had noticed something different about Luke. She was a woman with sharp instincts, and most of the time, she trusted them. And this time, her instincts told her again Luke wasn't ordinary. Tiana had a subordinate named Lev, the current commander of the Dauntless Vanguard. Back when Tiana herself had been the commander of the Dauntless Vanguard, Lev had been a complete nobody. His dream was simply to be a common soldier until retirement. Yes, despite possessing tremendous strength, he only wanted to be a regular footman. Until one day, on the battlefield, Tiana accidentally discovered Lev's outstanding performance. If she hadn't noticed him then, she would have missed a promising talent right under her nose. As for what came after, whether Lev wanted it or not, his rank kept climbing. Now he'd risen all the way to commander of the Dauntless Vanguard. And right now, Luke gave her the same feeling. Curious and genuinely amused, Tiana looked forward to seeing what Luke would do over the next year. Achoo! Walking down the corridor, Luke suddenly sneezed. He rubbed his nose and glanced back suspiciously. Was Roy, that old man, meddling again? After thinking about it, he decided not to bother arguing with Roy. Roy meant well. He was just old and loved worrying about everything. Luke only wanted to live the laid-back life, eat until full, sleep, wake up and eat again. Wasn't that comfortable? Why would he go suffer for no reason? Besides, so many generations of royals had planted so many trees, wasn't it enough for little Luke to enjoy the shade? With his hands clasped behind his back, Luke walked with an oddly world-weary elder vibe, and happened to run into Miss Crownguard coming the other way. Lux wore a pale, light-colored outfit that made her look bright and fresh. But right now, on that soft, fair face of hers were two very obvious red marks. One on her forehead, one on the tip of her nose. Luke took one look and chuckled. Miss Crownguard, you're really good at makeup. Very distinctive. Humph. I don't feel like talking to you. Getting teased the second they met, Lux shot him an angry look and walked right past him. She knew this place better than Luke did. Lux had only been there a short while when Kahina arrived too. She was also dressed casually, nothing extravagant, but pretty girls looked good in anything. As soon as she reached them, Kahina's eyes locked onto Lux, and then, pfft. The moment she saw Lux's innocent face and those two bright red marks, she completely lost it. Just looking at it, she could imagine last night's Lux blindfolded smacking into walls over and over. A full-on iron-headed menace. Good thing Kahina had only tried once at home, failed, and immediately gave up. Luke had already finished laughing, but when Kahina laughed too, he couldn't hold it in. He laughed so much his conscience started to sting a little. Was it really okay for him to deceive such a pure, innocent girl like this? Yeah, very okay. Stop laughing. Lux snapped, mortified and furious. She slapped the table and glared at Luke. I'm seriously starting to think your tutorial is wrong. You can't train a sixth sense like this. High-level techniques only succeed through repeated practice. Who masters something on the first day? Luke said with grave, heartfelt sincerity. Lux. Kahina could see it now, this guy probably spent his days entertaining himself by teasing Lux. And Lux, with her straightforward little brain, had no chance against him. For her best friend's sake, Kahina had to step in. I think next time His Highness gives you a method or advice, you should make him demonstrate it first. Even yesterday, when she first heard this method, she'd felt it was unreliable. Who could walk around blindfolded without relying on anything, let alone in a place with lots of obstacles? Only Lux would hear it and believe it. And with an already not too clever head, she'd now slammed it into walls that many times. Yeah, Lux froze. Why hadn't she thought of that last night? Wait, so all those times she hit the wall were for nothing. Realizing it, Miss Crownguard got even angrier. She slapped the table again, staring at Luke with a dangerous expression. Don't look at me like that. You're scaring me, Luke said, sitting across from her, feeling his skin prickle under those big eyes. The next second, Lux pulled a handkerchief out of her pocket, smiling with clear ill intent. Your Highness, since this is your method, it's not too much to ask you to demonstrate it, right? Actually, I read this in a book. That's not important. Isn't your Highness a special awakened sixth sense user? Lux cut him off and handed him the cloth, smiling sweetly. Let me see it for myself, okay? A smile like that was usually impossible for men to refuse, but only Luke could feel the cold behind it. Looks like Miss Crownguard was absolutely determined to see him smash into a wall today. And with Kahina on her side too, she looked a bit smarter, but still far too green. Fine. Luke sighed, closing his eyes. If you insist, I'll demonstrate. Go ahead and tie it. Very quickly, he caught a faint scent probably coming from Miss Crownguard. She stood behind him, wrapping the cloth around his eyes, loop after loop. Done checking? Don't say I cheated later, Luke asked as he stood up. No problem. Start. Each girl answered once. They were certain Luke couldn't see anything at all. Then let's set a route. From here to the statue in the center of the back garden there and back. Everything around Luke was pitch black, but he wasn't panicking in the slightest. After drinking the sixth sense enhancement potion, his perception now felt like he'd turned on X-ray vision. That had been confirmed through repeated tests afterward. Right now, his sixth sense reactions weren't any worse than that movie scene where Spider-Man fights Mysterio. In other words, just follow the feeling and you're good. Okay. Seeing how confidently he said it, the two girls suddenly felt a little less sure. Soon, they saw Luke start moving. Even with his vision blocked, he walked at a normal speed, smoothly sidestepping the sofa and heading toward the door. For the first part, you could still manage it with memory and basic awareness. That was what they told themselves as they followed behind. From here to the statue in the center of the back garden was about 200 meters, and there were plenty of obstacles along the way. As time passed, the two girls went from disbelief, to wavering, to outright shock. How is this possible? Kahina was stunned. She couldn't help running ahead to check whether Luke was cheating. He wasn't. Kahina didn't doubt that a sixth sense could exist, but she never imagined Luke's perception could be this strong. Lux was completely transfixed. Remembering how she'd slammed into walls again and again last night, the spark that had died inside her suddenly reignited. Chapter 40. Where did all that nutrition even go? Luke calculated the distance in his head while feeling the wind speed around him, roughly confirming where he was. After all, he was only cheating a little. This wasn't real X-ray vision. When he felt the wind pick up and the space open up, Luke confirmed he'd reached the back garden. I don't need to keep demonstrating, right? Luke pulled off the handkerchief. Even though the deal had been to reach the statue in the middle, the two girls behind him had been silent for a long while, so it probably wasn't necessary. Kahina, who had been convinced the entire time that Luke was just messing with Lux, blinked and nodded dumbly. From the starting point to here was at least 200 meters. Luke had been blindfolded and he'd even walked a little faster than a normal person. Was that training method actually real? Meanwhile, Lux's eyes were sparkling, like her brain was already projecting a glorious future where she awakened her sixth sense. Watching the two of them like that, Luke couldn't help feeling a little worried. Were these two fair, soft, innocent girls really about to get completely converted by his nonsense? Whatever. Not his problem. Honestly, it seemed kind of fun. When the three of them wandered back into the living room, they found Xin Zhao waiting there. Uncle Xin, what is it this time? Luke asked, curious. Your Highness, there is indeed something. Xin Zhao stood and said, His Majesty has purchased a residence for you outside the palace. You can go take a look now. A residence? Luke was still puzzled. Why buy a house outside out of nowhere? Why? Xin Zhao explained, Jarvan 3 believes you may need an environment where you can be more independent. So you can move out of the palace today. Luke paused. Moving out was going to happen sooner or later, but he didn't expect it this soon. And it definitely wasn't because Jarvan 3 didn't want to see him. Thinking back to the conversation that morning, Luke suspected someone had been stirring things up. Most likely that old man Roy. Still, moving out of the palace didn't sound bad. If he lived alone, Luke would be more comfortable. They set off immediately. There wasn't much luggage to pack anyway, so he was done in a few minutes. Lux and Kahina also wanted to join the excitement. The group got into a carriage and headed toward Luke's new home. After a while, the carriage came to a stop. Your Highness, we've arrived. The white-clad bodyguard from that day pulled open the carriage curtain. Xin Zhao couldn't leave the palace, so this man was handling the errand. The three of them got out. In front of them was a 3-story villa, one of those with a private yard. The yard wasn't small, probably 300 to 400 square meters. There were flowers and shrubs planted around, and a stone path running through it. Lux stared at the villa, looking puzzled. After they went in, they walked around the outside first. It looked small from the outside, but it was actually quite spacious inside. Further back, there was even a rear courtyard, 2 trees, a cluster of greenery, lush and vibrant. At the far end, there was also a fish pond about 100 square meters, set against the wall, though it was empty for now. Then there was the house itself. Inside, it wasn't small either, at least as big as before. There wasn't much furniture yet. After walking the whole place, Luke was satisfied. A house like this was something his old life self probably could never afford in a lifetime. Meanwhile, Lux kept finding it more and more familiar. She frowned and said, Why does this feel kind of familiar? The white-clad bodyguard glanced at her and answered, Miss Crown Guard, this property was purchased by His Majesty Jarvan 3 from High Marshal Tiana. Lux immediately understood. That explained it. This place used to be hers. Is it close to your house? Luke asked. He still wasn't familiar with the capital, and he hadn't recognized the area when they arrived. Lux nodded, thinking a moment. Maybe a 10-minute walk. That is pretty close, Luke said thoughtfully. So doesn't that mean I can go to your place and mooch dinner every day? Sure. You're welcome anytime. Lux beamed. Your Highness, this is your allowance from His Majesty. At that, Luke saw the white-clad bodyguard take out a heavy coin pouch. It was noticeably bigger than a normal one. There are 250 gold coins inside, the bodyguard said as he set the pouch on the table. As for the keys, I'll hold them for now in case you're not home this afternoon. Furniture will be delivered one after another. Luke nodded. All right, got it. Your Highness, do you have any other questions? No, then I'll take my leave. The bodyguard seemed to have a bit of trauma around Luke, because he left very quickly. Luke picked up the coin pouch, weighed it in his hand. It was satisfyingly heavy. In a good mood, he waved grandly and declared, I'm treating today. Order whatever you want. They were definitely eating out for this meal. Kahina and Lux didn't refuse. The three of them went to the same restaurant Luke had visited last time. This time, when the server saw him, the attitude was respectful to the point of reverence. The meal ended up costing over 30 gold coins. Absurdly expensive. Mainly because Luke had a big appetite, and seated at the same table was Miss Crown Guard, who was no less terrifying. Ever since that so-called cake competition, Luke had learned something. Lux might be small, but her appetite absolutely wasn't. Watching her order 2 more dessert portions, Luke finally couldn't help looking at her a few extra times. Lux noticed immediately. She stared back, wary. What are you looking at me for? When we ordered, you didn't say you wanted any. Ever since the strawberry incident, she'd gotten a little protective of food around Luke. Luke fell silent, looked away, and waited lazily. He honestly had no idea where all that food went. Looks like we're not far from the Illuminators' church. Want to go take a look after this? Kahina suggested. Luke figured he didn't have anything else planned for the afternoon, so he agreed. Lux didn't mind either. In her eyes, as long as she wasn't going home far away from that tiger of a mother, anywhere was fun. After eating, the three of them headed to the Illuminators' church. They ran into old Lady Yuna again, and her daughter, Lola. From what they learned, old Lady Yuna came here to help out. To repay the Illuminators' kindness, she used her free time outside of work to assist here. At the same time, Luke also learned that the thief who had stolen her purse last time had actually been caught. Speaking of that, we really have to thank your Highness, old Lady Yuna said, looking at Luke. She hadn't expected the young man who helped her before to be a prince of the realm. Luke looked confused. But I didn't really do anything. Kahina smiled and explained, after your Highness caught that thief last time, the Capital Security Bureau went on high alert. They started a major crackdown on thieves that very day. 41, Chapter 41, Miss Crown Guard frozen on the spot. For the thieves in the capital, the past few days could only be described as a bloodbath. The thief who had stolen old Lady Yuna's wallet was caught during that period as well. Under interrogation, since he remembered it clearly, he confessed everything. So that's what happened afterward. Luke had no idea about any of the follow-up at all and hadn't cared in the slightest. He remembered that after returning that day, he hadn't left the royal palace. I heard the crime rate among thieves in the capital has dropped a lot these past few days, Kahina said with a bright smile. Catching more is never a bad thing, Luke chuckled, showing his support for the crackdown. The three continued strolling around. Just then, a burst of children's voices caught their attention. Luke looked over and saw a bunch of kids still pretty young laughing and playing as they ran out. He asked in confusion, since when were there so many kids here? Kahina sighed. 2 days ago. The illuminators found them while traveling all over the country, kids without parents, or kids abandoned by their parents. The children wore matching outfits, laughing innocently as they played. This was one of the illuminators' duties. They were spread across the nation, searching for those in need. Children who'd lost their parents like this appeared every year. The illuminators' responsibility was to do their best to find adoptive parents willing to take them in. If none could be found, then the illuminators would raise them so that in the future, they would become new illuminators themselves. The children played in small groups of 2 or 3, but the 3 of them noticed one lone figure. A short-haired boy, about 6 or 7, sat on a bench in the church. A crude red cape hung over his shoulders, and he quietly watched the other kids playing. In those eyes was a sadness that didn't belong to someone that young. Lux asked, why is he alone? That child's name is Mof. He grew up faster than kids his age. He seems to know he was abandoned by his parents, but he refuses to accept it, so even after coming here, he can't bring himself to be happy, Kahina said. As she spoke, the 3 also noticed another detail. Every so often, Mof would open his hand to look at what was inside. It seemed to be a piece of candy, something he guarded like a treasure, as if he couldn't bear to eat it. Seeing that, Luke thought for a moment, then suggested, Miss Crownguard, want to have a little contest. A contest for what? Lux immediately asked, curious. Luke smiled. Let's see who can get that candy from Mof first. Humph, boring. Lux curled her lip. Even so, she still walked over to Mof. She flicked her hair, adjusted her expression, then squatted in front of him with an angelic smile. Your name is Mof, right? Mof looked at her and nodded. My name is Lux. Can we be friends? Lux spoke gently. Mof hesitated, then nodded again. Okay. Then we're friends now, Mof. Could you give me that candy? I'll pay you back with lots and lots of pieces, Lux said sincerely, brimming with confidence. No. Who would have thought Mof would become instantly guarded? He jumped off the bench, backed away from Lux, and clutched the candy like it was his life. My mom said the prettier the woman is, the less you can trust her. Guess she was right. Miss Crownguard's angelic smile froze on the spot. She stood there, stiff, like she couldn't believe she'd been rejected. She was Lux Crownguard. Forget one piece of candy, she had no idea how many noble young men were lining up to gift her an entire candy house. And yet now, she'd been turned down by a little kid. And it happened right after she used her most confident, gentle approach. Lux stood up and trudged back, completely deflated, only to see Luke's faintly mocking look, and that infuriating grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. So infuriating. Extremely infuriating. She flared up at once, teeth clenched. I don't believe you can do it. She could see it clearly, in Mof's eyes right now, nothing mattered more than that candy. If even she, Lux Crownguard, had failed, she refused to believe Luke could succeed. Luke asked, and if I do it? Lux answered immediately, name any request you want. Deal. Luke nodded. To be safe, Lux added seriously, and you can't lie to a child. What do you take me for? Luke shook his head with a laugh. Then, confident, he walked over with a smile and stopped in front of Mof. Mof was already on high alert now. Someone was trying to take the candy he loved most, absolutely not allowed. First came a big sister, no, a really pretty older girl, smiling beautifully. Now came an older guy, also smiling beautifully. His instincts told him these 2 probably weren't good people at all. Don't be so tense, Mof, Luke said, gesturing for him to calm down. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. Want to make a bet? Mof was a kid, so it wasn't hard for curiosity to slip in, but he still asked warily, a bet on what? Do you believe I can draw a little turtle on that sister's face over there? Luke kept his voice low, flicking his eyes toward Lux. Mof turned his head too, checking again and again, then said decisively, no. Then we'll bet on that. Luke smiled. Give me your candy. If I lose, I'll pay you back 10 pieces. Mof looked back at Lux again. He hesitated for a long time, he really didn't believe it. In the end, with immense reluctance, he handed the candy to Luke. Watch closely, Luke said. Candy in hand, he stood and walked back, smiling. He opened his palm and showed the candy inside. Miss Crownguard, do you need to confirm if it's real? Lux stared at the candy, her big eyes full of disbelief. How did you do that? Doesn't matter how I did it, are you still honoring what you just said? Luke asked with a cheerful grin. At that moment, Kahina was smiling too, clearly entertained by her friend digging her own grave. Lux felt a little guilty. With Luke looking at her like that, she had a very bad feeling about what was coming. But backing out would be even more embarrassing. In the end, Miss Crownguard clenched her teeth. What request? Say it. Luke turned to Kahina. Do you have a pen? Lux immediately realized what was about to happen. She looked at Kahina pitifully, hoping her friend would make an excuse and brush it off. But instead, Kahina replied instantly, I do. Wait here. She practically jogged away, like she was afraid she'd miss something. In less than 2 minutes, she came back with a pen. Your Highness, the pen is here. Kahina said with a smile, handing it to Luke. And Lux could only stare at her friend in disbelief, like she couldn't believe she'd just been sold out like this. 42 Chapter 42 Mom won't let me play with idiots. 42 Chapter 42 Mom won't let me play with idiots. Miss Crownguard, choose for yourself where do you want me to draw it. Luke took the pen and asked with a grin. Lux seemed like she'd already foreseen her fate. She simply closed her eyes, lifted her chin, and said, just make it quick. Luke showed absolutely no mercy. He popped the cap, and the black ink immediately marked Miss Crownguard's flawless pale cheek. After a few strokes, Luke pulled his hand back in satisfaction. My drawing skills are still pretty good. A cute little turtle had appeared on Lux's right cheek. Kahina rubbed her chin and nodded in agreement. They really are. Lux's eyes flew open. She hurried around looking for a mirror. A moment later, she stared at her reflection with a despairing look in her eyes. How was Lux supposed to face anyone like this? Didn't she have any dignity at all? Miss Crownguard, remember you can only wipe it off tonight, Luke added smugly. In the mirror, Lux immediately caught sight of his unbearably arrogant face. Unforgivable. Year 679 of the Demation calendar. Luke Lightshield has made me lose all face. I, Lux, will remember this. She silently clenched her fist, adding another tally mark to her grudges. So, I won, right? Luke said, smiling at Mof as the boy walked back over. You won, Mof replied, accepting the loss. He still couldn't quite believe it, but the truth was right in front of him. Then this candy is mine. Luke tore open the wrapper and, without the slightest hesitation, tossed it into his mouth. It was sweet just like plain sugar. Seeing that, a flash of reluctance and disappointment passed through Mof's eyes. He lowered his head and didn't say anything. Lux, still holding the mirror, suddenly sensed something was off. She turned around and demanded, what are you talking about? Why can't I understand any of it? Luke said, it's simple. The candy may have ended up in my hand, but before that, it didn't belong to me. Lux didn't get it at first. What does that mean? Luke smiled and shot back, you really want to know? Seeing him still playing coy, Lux glared at him and urged, spit it out. So Luke explained, Mof didn't believe I could draw a turtle on your face, so he bet this candy against me. And the result is obvious, I won. Why you Lux froze on the spot. It took her ages to react, her finger pointing at Luke as she got so flustered she could barely speak. What about me? Luke asked innocently. Cheating. Did the rules say I couldn't do it like that? Luke's second question left Lux stunned again. In just a few lines, it almost fried Miss Crownguard's brain. Because the rules really hadn't said he couldn't. At the start, the condition for winning was simply getting Mof's candy. But later she'd added that extra Wager he could make any request, and the added rule was that he wasn't allowed to trick Mof. From start to finish, Luke technically hadn't tricked Mof at all. He'd just exploited a loophole in the rules and pulled off a double win. Once Lux figured it out, the world instantly became a far less beautiful place. Staring at that infuriating face of his, Lux's anger exploded. Devious. Shameless. She had never seen someone so devious and shameless in her life. Kahina watched her friend's furious, defeated look and could only shake her head. She'd basically figured it out. Lux wasn't going to outplay his highness. Not even close. Mof lifted his head and stared blankly at Luke. He'd more or less pieced it together as well. He finally understood the candy was the key to everything. Luke had used it to get a double win and Mof had handed it over with his own 2 hands. He shot Luke a resentful look, then turned around and left. See, now he's mad. Lux said, looking at Luke with disgust. You even swindled a kid out of his candy. Fine, you got it, then you actually ate it. What did I swindle him out of? Luke chewed as he spoke, righteous as could be. I won it with my own ability. Why shouldn't I eat it? I'm not even going to talk to you, Lux snapped, rolling her eyes. Then she looked over and saw Mof sitting alone again, those disappointed eyes fixed on the children playing in the distance. So he did want to play. Realizing that, Lux walked over. Soon, she was in front of Mof again. She crouched down and put on a pleasant smile. Mof, do you want to go play some games with me? Miss Crownguard had regained her confidence. With Luke as such a glaring contrast, she refused to believe Mof would reject her again. Mof looked up at her, glanced at the turtle drawn on her face, silently scooted farther away, and shook his head. No, my mom says I'm not allowed to play with idiots. Lux. You're this young and you're already this good with words. Rejected a second time, Lux froze as if struck by lightning. What just happened? Who was she? Where was she? Did she really have not even a tiny bit of charm? Lux stood up and wandered back again, completely deflated. Let's go back. I don't want to stay here anymore. Don't lose heart. Honestly, you have a lot of good qualities, Luke tried to comfort her. Really? Lux lifted her head, eyes shining. Like what? For example, Luke choked, then immediately tossed the problem to Kahina, who'd been enjoying the show. Kahina definitely knows. Kahina. She couldn't think of anything either. Seeing their reactions, Lux felt like an arrow had pierced her heart. Her mentality outright collapsed. Luke saw the resentful look in Miss Crownguard's eyes and felt that if he stayed any longer, he might actually get bitten. So he slowly walked away straight toward Moth. Moth noticed him approaching, looked up once, then immediately looked away. Why don't you go play with them? Luke asked. I'm not a little kid anymore. I'm not playing those childish games, Moth replied with a face full of disdain. Impressive. Then why do you keep watching? Luke asked again. Moth shot Luke a look and turned his head away. I don't want to talk to you. Luke immediately grinned. About what happened just now you're not convinced, are you? Of course. Moth snapped back, clearly angry. If I'd known you two had your own wager, I never would have handed over the candy. There's no such thing as if I'd known, in this world, Luke chuckled. His words were like a knife, mercilessly stabbing right into Moth's wound. Then let me ask you, if you'd known your parents would abandon you, what would you have done? Moth went rigid. He was left speechless, mouth opening and closing, but not a single word coming out. If he'd known his parents would throw him away, what could he have done? Cling to them before they abandoned him? Refuse to sleep? That wouldn't work. He was just a kid. If they wanted to leave, they'd find a way, and he couldn't stay awake forever. 43, Chapter 43. Does this country even have a future? Or beg them, ask them not to leave him. If that worked, would he still be here? Scene after scene flashed through Moth's mind. The more he thought, the sadder he became. If that was how it was, then he'd rather never have known in advance. That way, the final memories of being with his parents would still be beautiful. As he kept thinking, Moth's eyes filled with tears. He clenched his jaw and fought hard not to cry. The truth was, he understood everything. He'd been abandoned, just refused to accept it. He desperately wanted to ask why. Why him? There is no why. Aren't you the one who calls yourself an adult? Then I'll tell you, this is the adult world. Luke could tell from Moth's expression exactly what he wanted to say. He spoke with a cruelty that didn't sound like something you'd say to a child at all. If you insist on a reason, then here it is. You were a burden. You dragged the family down. Maybe you love them, but they don't love you. That line broke Moth on the spot. Tears fell one after another onto the floor, and the next second he let out a wail and completely fell apart, sobbing at the top of his lungs. The crying immediately drew plenty of attention inside the church. The illuminators saw it was the prince teasing a kid and didn't plan to interfere. Still, this prince really had a nasty sense of humor. He'd made a child cry and was still grinning. The children who'd been playing around also heard the sobbing and looked over. Moth is giving everyone a demonstration of how to cry your heart out, Luke said with a smile. He knew his words had been harsh, but he could tell Moth could take it. Because Moth already understood everything. No one had just ever spoken it out loud to him. At that moment, the kids crowded over, faces full of amazement. Wow, that's awesome. He's crying so realistically. I thought it was real. I can only cry like that when my mom hits me with a stick. Surrounded by a bunch of kids like a zoo animal, getting gawked at and commented on. Moth ended up crying so hard he started feeling embarrassed. Little by little, he ran out of steam. His eyes were red. He sniffled and wiped at his tears. Alright, show's over. Scatter. Luke waved a hand, and the kids immediately chattered as they ran off. Then he looked back at Moth, still cheerful. Aren't you an adult? Adults cry like that. Moth glared at him, jumped off the bench, and pointed angrily. You're awful. When I grow up, I'm going to beat you up. He'd never seen an adult say something that cruel to a kid. Only this guy. Not only did he swindle candy from a kid, he also stabbed a kid right in the heart. Then it wouldn't be too much if I beat you up first, right? Luke dropped the smile, stood, and stepped closer. Moth was instantly scared and backed away repeatedly, fear flickering in his eyes. Was this guy really going to hit a kid? Seeing that, even Lux couldn't help wanting to walk over and stop him. Because she genuinely suspected Luke was capable of doing it. But Luke wasn't quite as bad as they feared. He sat back down and mocked him instead. You scare that easily and you still want to beat me up someday? With my status, I wouldn't even need to lift a hand to deal with you. Moth asked instinctively, what status? Do you know who the king is? I do. That's my father. Moth froze. Even at his age, he knew what the king meant. Which meant the guy in front of him was a prince. Staring at this rather good-looking man, Moth found it hard to believe. If this was what the prince of this country was like, did it even have a future? Luke asked, so, you still want to beat me up? Moth thought about it, then tested the waters. If I beat you up, would I be punished? This time, Luke paused. This little brat's brain really was stubbornly direct after all that. He was still considering it. You'd probably get thrown into a dungeon for a very, very long time, Luke said after snapping back to himself. By the time you got out, you'd be an old man with white hair. Moth pictured it, coughed, and said, then never mind. I don't want to beat you up anymore. Good. I like how sensible you are, Luke said with satisfaction. Lux and Kahina were both speechless. Did Jarvan 3 know that his son was over here bullying a 7-year-old? Come here. I want to talk to you in private, Luke said, beckoning. Moph hesitated, but still walked over and hopped back onto the bench. I don't admire people like this very often, Moph. You're pretty impressive, Luke said, rare praise in his tone. Now I'm going to give you a mission. Moph looked confused. What mission? See that group of kids over there? They'll be very useful to me in the future, but I don't know them well. Luke nodded toward the children playing. I'm ordering you to become their leader, and in the future, you'll be used by me. Moph asked blankly, how am I supposed to do that? However you do it, you have to succeed. Understood. Luke patted Moph on the shoulder with heavy, serious emphasis. The moment that hand landed, Moph's emotions surged uncontrollably. In Luke's eyes, he saw trust. Even though he'd hated this guy earlier, right now, Moph realized he'd been wrong. Because from the very beginning, only this guy had treated him like an adult. And now he was entrusting him with something this important. I can actually help the prince. The thought made Moph even more excited. He jumped down from the bench, raised his hand over his head solemnly, and said, I will complete the mission. After that, he shot Luke a look and marched straight toward the group of kids. Chest out, head high, he called out loudly, that's not how you play the game. If you want to play Eagle Catches the Chicks, put your thumb up. The second he said it, it grabbed all the kids' attention. I want to play. I want to play. Me too. I'm in. The innocent kids immediately raised their hands with their thumbs up, showing they wanted to join. So Moph started organizing them, and before long, he was completely absorbed into the group. Lux just stood there, stunned. She turned to Kahina, baffled. Why did their relationship suddenly get so good? Why would Moph rather play with this guy than play with me? Lux couldn't understand it. Luke had literally made Moph cry, and Moph still went running after him happily. She'd been so gentle, and Moph couldn't have cared less. Kahina tilted her head, thought for a moment, then said, maybe because you're dumb. Question mark. Lux slowly produced a question mark, her expression growing increasingly dangerous. What is wrong with you today? I've been putting up with you for ages. Miss Crownguard pounced on Kahina. Wait no, I'm sorry. Kahina yelped and took off running. The two girls chased and wrestled playfully, and inside the Illuminator's church, it was like the sadness had vanished, bursts of laughter drifting out now and then. 44, Chapter 44, Made. The three of them stayed at the Illuminator's church and volunteered to help with quite a few tasks. The whole process was actually pretty enjoyable. By around evening, they left the Illuminator's church. Needless to say, the moment Miss Crownguard got home with a little turtle sitting proudly on her face, she ran straight into Lady Agatha's dark expression and promptly experienced what motherly love truly meant. Less than 2 minutes later, a furious, miserable scream rang out from the Crownguard estate, filled to the brim with resentment toward a certain prince. Meanwhile, Luke was walking home alone when he suddenly sneezed for no reason. It feels like I've been targeted by a vengeful spirit. With his sixth sense greatly enhanced, Luke's expression turned serious. Demacia really wasn't as peaceful as it looked on the surface. This country had plenty of hidden threats. Ferocious beasts, demons, things like that existed in all sorts of regions. But then he remembered he was in the capital, so he didn't dwell on it. When he was close to home, he saw the white-clad bodyguard standing quietly at the door, waiting. He'd clearly been there all afternoon. Your Highness, these are the keys. When Luke approached, the bodyguard handed him the keys to the mansion behind him. Thanks for your hard work, Luke said as he took them, genuinely feeling how tough their job was. This is my duty, the bodyguard replied, lowering his head. Considering you'll be living alone, the palace has been selecting several outstanding stewards from across the capital. If all goes as expected, there will be results by tomorrow morning. Oh, then let me know when it's decided, Luke nodded. He'd been feeling like something was missing. Of course he was a prince, yet he had no one at his side to handle daily service. Yes, I'll take my leave. The bodyguard gave a slight bow and departed. Luke opened his front door and stepped inside. Once in, he found the furniture already fully arranged. The house no longer felt so empty. He lounged on the sofa. The warm dusk light spilled through the window, and he couldn't help stretching lazily. So this was what living alone would be like. The thought put a smile on Luke's face. Originally, he'd been thinking maybe he'd go mooch dinner at the Crownguard estate. But the moment the idea surfaced, an aggrieved face flashed through his mind, and Luke immediately killed the thought. Never mind. I'll figure something out myself. The next day, Luke woke up hungry. When he opened his eyes, it was already late morning. Sunlight poured in through the window and spread across the floor, making the whole room feel pleasantly warm. He sat up and stared into space for a bit. No one would bother him anymore, sure, but it really did seem like he needed someone around to make breakfast. Daily check-in. After thinking it over, Luke did his daily check-in first. Congratulations, host. You have obtained skill, prestidigitation. Congratulations, host. You have obtained fearless, early stage, power trial card, 1 hour. Congratulations, host. You have obtained rare exotic fruit, crimson jewel grape. Skill detected, prestidigitation. Learn it, learn it. Seeing he'd gotten another skill, Luke glanced at it and chose to learn it. At once, a strange, wonderful sensation rose up. Luke lifted his hand, feeling a subtle difference. Whether it was his imagination or not, his hand seemed better looking. When the sensation faded, information about prestidigitation appeared in his mind. Just as the name suggested, it was a magician-like skill, enhancing hand coordination. It sounded pretty ordinary, but Luke's dexterity and speed had clearly increased by a lot. He took out a silver coin. With a flick of his thumb, it leapt into the air then, as it fell, Luke caught it again. The coin rolled deftly across his fingertips, and in the blink of an eye, it vanished. With normal eyesight, you wouldn't be able to track it at all. Luke played around for a bit, then quickly got bored. After that, he took out the rare exotic fruit, the crimson jewel grape. The crimson jewel grape was bright red. It looked like a pear, crystal clear, and when you examined it closely, it was as dazzling as a gemstone. It looked incredible, like a work of art. Any girl who saw it would probably hesitate to eat it. Luke glanced at it once, then took a big bite and started crunching away. He was hungry in the morning anyway. No wonder it was called a grape. The flavor really was grape, sweet and fragrant. Congratulations, host. Aptitude +1. Congratulations, host. Aptitude has advanced to promising. 2 notifications popped up in a row. Luke looked, and sure enough his aptitude had advanced. It had reached promising, and it looked like there were 5 more tiers after that. The moment he thought about it, Luke instantly lost interest. After feeling it out, he didn't notice much of anything from the breakthrough, so he couldn't be bothered to care. The last reward was the Fearless, Early Stage, Power Trial card, lasting 1 hour. After using it, for 1 hour Luke would possess Early Stage Fearless Strength. It could serve as a self-defense trump card. Not bad, but he'd keep it for later. He finished the crimson jewel grape in a few bites and leisurely went to wash up. Right after he finished, he heard someone outside ringing the bell. Of course, Demasha wasn't at that level of technology yet. Calling it a doorbell was just a figure of speech. There was actually a small bell at the entrance. If a household didn't have servants waiting at the door, visitors would use a small hammer prepared nearby to strike the bell. So Luke went outside and saw quite a few people standing there, with the white-clad bodyguard in front. Thinking of what the bodyguard had said yesterday, the people behind him were probably the high-quality stewards the palace had screened. Luke opened the door and led everyone into the living room. "Your Highness, these are the candidates selected by the palace," the white-clad bodyguard said beside him. "You may choose whichever you find satisfactory. From today onward, that person will be responsible for your household affairs." Luke sat on the sofa while the stewards stood in a line in front of him. He scanned from left to right. There were both men and women. There was an old man with white hair slicked back, dressed in a proper suit, wearing glasses, standing ramrod straight. One glance and you could tell he was a veteran steward. There were also younger ones, sharp and efficient, full of vigor, like newcomers who'd only just entered the profession. Overall, each had their own strengths, but none of that truly grabbed Luke. Looks were definitely a priority. And beyond that, the men could leave. Very quickly, Luke filtered out a large portion in his mind. The ones left were all pretty girls. They wore standard-made outfits and were dressed up neatly and attractively. And among them, one stood out in particular, waterfall-like black hair, violet eyes as beautiful as gemstones, about 170 centimeters tall. With the oversized maid outfit, it was hard to tell her figure. Most importantly, her expressionless, delicate face paired with that maid outfit so perfectly it felt uncanny. Luke couldn't deny he'd always been a looks guy, but the reason this maid caught his attention wasn't just her appearance. More than anything, it was the unique aura she carried. As if she had been born to be a maid. 45, Chapter 45, it has to be that looking at trash stare. 45, Chapter 45, it has to be that looking at trash stare. So, during the one-on-one interview, Luke asked her, "What's your name?" "Your Highness, my name is Yurna Doer," Yurna replied. Her voice was mature and cool, yet even when answering, there wasn't the slightest ripple in her tone, giving off an icy, aloof vibe. Yurna. Luke thought for a moment, then asked, "If the person standing in front of you is someone you absolutely hate, what expression would you show?" Faced with that question, Yurna looked puzzled. But she didn't ask why. As a maid, her job was simply to respond. So Yurna thought seriously for a moment. Then she lifted her chin slightly, angled her delicate nose toward Luke, drew out the corner of her mouth as if clicking her tongue, furrowed her brows, and her eyes looked at him like he was literal garbage. The dark vibe shot straight to Max. Soul. This was the soul of a maid. Luke was applauding internally. In that instant, Yurna gave the word maid its very soul. "That look like you were trash was just too perfect." "All right. Stop," Luke said calmly, signaling her to end the performance. The very next second, Yurna's face returned to its previous blank expression, completely natural, perfectly controlled. "Since your Highness has chosen Yurna, I will return to the palace to report," the white-clad bodyguard said after learning Luke had finalized his selection. Go on," Luke nodded. Soon, the bodyguard left with the rest of the candidates, and the mansion was left with only master and servant. "Yurna," Luke asked from the sofa, "what exactly are your duties?" "First, attend to your Highness's daily needs, such as 3 meals a day. Second, manage affairs within your residence, including purchasing necessities and settling accounts. Third, protect your highness's safety, Yurna said, standing to the side. Protect my safety. Luke glanced over and examined the calm-faced maid. Are you really that capable? One of the palace's screening requirements is strength at late stage unyielding, Yurna replied evenly. It was just an explanation, but it also meant her strength started at late stage unyielding at minimum. Luke couldn't help looking a few more times. Who would have thought she was a combat maid? Late stage unyielding meant she was already close to fearless. By that measure, her realm was nearly 2 full major tiers above Luke's. But it didn't matter. Got it. Go pour me a glass of water, Luke yawned. Yes, Yurna answered, turning and leaving at once. Luke leaned back into the sofa, watching the pretty maid bustle around, and couldn't help sighing. So this was how the rich lived. From now on, even something as simple as pouring water wouldn't require him to do it himself. Before long, a cup of hot water was placed on the table in front of him. After finishing, Yurna stood quietly to the side, expressionless, waiting for the next order. Just then, another round of bell ringing sounded outside. Luke didn't say a word. Yurna had already turned and gone to open the door. What's your name? A voice asked outside. To Miss Crownguard, my name is Yurna Doer, Yurna replied. Oh, the palace sent you to take care of that guy. Sounds like you're going to have a rough time, Lux said. From outside came a bit of casual chatter, the clearest part being a blonde girl slandering him like she was on a mission. She was just about done turning him into a useless wreck. Luke was already slightly annoyed and had just stood up when he saw Miss Crownguard walking in along with the very obvious red marks on her forehead and the bridge of her nose. Instantly, Luke decided to forgive her. Then he spotted Kahina too. She'd ultimately gotten hit by it as well. Clearly she'd been training hard last night too. No telling how many times she'd slammed into something. Ahem, you two really love that makeup style, huh? Luke coughed. For one of the few times in his life, his conscience actually twinged. The two girls shot him a look at the same time. Seeing how obviously he knew exactly what was going on, their irritation spiked immediately. This sixth sense training method was way too brutal. Last night my mom thought I'd lost it and wouldn't let me keep practicing, Lux sighed, sitting down as the topic landed there. Same, Kahina sat too. My sister thought I was possessed. Remembering Sona's worried look, Kahina felt like she really had been acting crazy. Who knew how many times she'd run into the wall last night? Toward the end, her head had been fuzzy, yet she still felt like she'd gained something. That was the beauty of self-delusion. Even if it didn't work, if it felt like it worked, then it worked. Yurna had heated water at just the right time and poured cups for the two of them. Luke lifted his cup, took a sip, and said, I think stopping while you're ahead is fine. Maybe this method is still too early for you. Actually, I've got another pretty good option. As he spoke, he could already feel the two girls' looks change. Their gaze turned into blades, stabbing straight at him. Lux stared at Luke with a dangerous expression. Then why didn't you say so earlier? Kahina's eyes were just as hazardous. For the first time, Luke felt a little guilty, but then he remembered he had a combat maid standing behind him, and his confidence came right back. I just wanted to test. Before he could finish, a throw pillow flew straight at his face. Luke dodged on instinct. The pillow sailed past and Yurna caught it cleanly. I knew it. This guy was messing with us on purpose. Lux fumed, grabbing another pillow. This time, Kahina had no patience left either. She clenched her small fist, and her knuckles actually cracked. It was genuinely intimidating. In that split second, Luke realized that if he didn't calm them down right now, he'd very likely be lying on the floor in the next second. The method depends on the person. And now I think you're actually better suited for a different method, he said, keeping his composure. Sure enough, before beating Luke up, the two of them still cared more about an alternate way to train their sixth sense. So Luke handed them the introductory guide to guiding spiritual energy. Demacia definitely didn't have something like this, and it was absolutely useful. If they learned it, it would increase mental power wound that indirectly strengthen their sixth sense. Explaining it out loud wouldn't be easy to understand. The best option was writing it down and letting them study it at home. Under the girls' suspicious stares, Luke repeatedly guaranteed it was real, and only then did they grudgingly forgive him. Just read it yourselves. And burn it after you're done, got it? Luke took another sip of water and reminded them. The two girls nodded repeatedly, promising they wouldn't spread it. When it came to something like this, they were still very serious. Honestly, Luke wasn't even afraid of it leaking. It wasn't anything especially important. Moreover, it was only the introductory section, and even he didn't think much of it. 46, Chapter 46, Have these two always been this brave? The two girls huddled together and studied it for ages, but still couldn't make heads or tails of it. In the end, they decided they'd dig into it properly after they got back. As for right now, there was something else to do. Let's play a game. Lux suddenly said with bright enthusiasm. Kahina immediately nodded. Sure. What about you, Your Highness? Two pairs of eyes instantly turned to Luke. I'm fine with it. What are we playing? Luke nodded. There really wasn't anything else to do at the moment. This. Lux looked like she'd been prepared for that question. She slipped a hand into her pocket and actually pulled out a deck of playing cards. Cards had started getting popular pretty early on, and people had come up with all sorts of ways to play. She opened the box and took out the deck. Lux blinked and asked, ever played Turtle Duck Rabbit Race? Luke shook his head. It's like this, you take a deck, remove the 2 jokers and 4 random cards, then deal it into 3 hands 16 cards each. A is just below 2. Other than that, high cards beat low cards. Whoever gets rid of all their cards first loses. Lux explained the rules. Luke understood. It sounded like a variant of those run-fast style card games, pairs, straights, bombs, 3 of a kind, and straight flushes and the like. Even the name gave it away, Turtle Duck Rabbit Race. Whoever runs the fastest wins. Except in this game, there would only be one loser. Anyway, if you don't know how to play, you'll get it after 1 round. Lux started pulling cards out while she talked. She first picked out the 2 jokers, then randomly removed 4 more cards. Then she shuffled and dealt. The 3 of them played a quick practice round while she explained the details as they went. Unsurprisingly, Luke lost the first round. Got it now? Lux asked. Got it. Luke nodded. Lux said, then now we're playing for real. Kahina thought for a moment and said, should we set a punishment for the loser? We can. Actually there has to be one. Lux agreed instantly, then looked at Luke. What do you think? I'm fine with it. Luke nodded again. So what punishment? Lux asked. All 3 of them fell into thought. Luke pondered for a second, then, as if by accident, glanced at the red marks on the 2 girls' foreheads. After thinking it over, he tested the waters. How about a flick to the forehead? Lux, question mark. Kahina, question mark. 2 giant question marks slapped Luke right in the face. Flick your, are you serious? I'm kidding. Luke was just about to take it back. No. Lux abruptly lifted one hand to stop him. With a cold snort, she said, since you suggested it, that's the punishment. I agree too. Kahina added right away. They both agreed. Let me be completely honest at this game, I'm known as the undefeated king. Lux preened confidently, giving Luke a mocking look. Just hope you don't regret it later. That good, huh? Luke rubbed his chin, looking at her confident little face. Something was off. 9 times out of 10, something was very off. Have these 2 always been this bold? Lux turned the cards over, casually picked 4 to remove, then gave the deck a quick shuffle. Without drawing attention to it, she shot Kahina a look and said, alright, I'm dealing. Kahina returned the look. Today, they were going to make this annoying guy learn what it meant to ask for trouble. They came prepared. The 2 of them had formed an alliance long before they came to Luke's house 2 against 1. No matter how you looked at it, the advantage was theirs. The revenge match was today. You like flicking foreheads, do you? The 2 girls sneaked a glance at Luke. On the surface, though, one kept dealing calmly, while the other started sorting her hand as if nothing was going on. Yurna, go bring down the fruit from upstairs, Luke said as he picked up his cards, giving an order at the same time. Yes, Your Highness, Yurna replied immediately, and went. Very soon, Lux finished dealing. All 3 picked up their hands and started pulling out any pairs from their cards. Who has the 3 of hearts? Luke asked while organizing his hand. I do. Lux already had her hand sorted. She revealed the 3 of hearts and secured the first lead. I'll start with this. The first play had to include the 3 of hearts, so she tossed it onto the table. Then it was Luke's turn. He looked at his cards and followed with 1. Kahina chose to pass. Just then, Yurna came back down the stairs and said, Your Highness, it seems the fruit has already been eaten. Eaten already? All right then. Luke answered casually. Neither girl paid any attention to it, and they kept playing. The first couple of rounds were calm enough. All 3 were trying to fight for control of the lead. Halfway through the game, Luke began to notice something. He realized that when he didn't have the lead, Lux and Kahina didn't interfere with each other at all. But the moment he took control of the lead, the gunpowder smell between the 2 girls shot straight through the roof. Add in their terrible acting and those, totally inconspicuous, exchanged glances. Luke finally got it. So he jumped right into a trap. No wonder these 2 had been so eager to play and so eager to set a punishment. Still, even though he saw through it, Luke had no intention of calling them out. He continued playing along with their performance. After all, who would win and who would lose was still up in the air. Round after round went by. Finally, the 3 of them were running low on cards. The lead was in Lux's hands. She'd just taken it from Luke. At this moment, Luke had 4 cards left. Lux had 7. Kahina only had 1. By this situation, Kahina was extremely likely to lose. But Lux glanced at her excellent hand and curled her lips into a confident smile. A bomb of 6s, plus 3 8s. If she wanted to win right now, she could play the 3 8s first and then finish with the bomb instant victory. But if she did that, Luke would get the lead afterward, which would be very bad for Kahina. However, they hadn't seen any 7s the entire game, and since 4 random cards had been removed and Luke had just passed earlier, it proved that Luke's 4 cards weren't a bomb. After a split-second brainstorm, Miss Crownguard confidently played a single card. An 8. That's right. She was going to win twice over. Luke looked troubled, glanced at his hand, and sighed. Pass. That answer surprised both girls. Kahina's face lit up with delight. She immediately slapped down her final card and became the first to go out. Next came the one-on-one showdown. And Lux, from Luke's response, launched another round of frantic calculation. If he couldn't beat a single 8, then his hand was either a straight, 2 pairs, or low singles below 8. No matter how you looked at it, he had no chance of winning anymore. And as for her, no matter what she played, she wouldn't lose. The sweet rush of revenge was already flooding Miss Crownguard's heart. Giddy, she decided she was going to savor this and torment Luke properly. So, another 8. Pass. Then another 8. Lux's little face was flushed with excitement, making her look ridiculously adorable. For the first time, seriously, the first time in her life, she was holding Luke so effortlessly in the palm of her hand. You can't play, can you? Watch me. Just as Miss Crownguard was about to close it out with her bomb, she suddenly saw Luke smiling. A bad feeling rose up instantly and it grew alarmingly strong. Then she watched as Luke slowly laid down his 4 remaining cards. Bomb. On the table were 4 sevens. That bomb blew the soul right out of Miss Crownguard. That excited look was still frozen on her face, but her bright eyes dimmed bit by bit. Looks like I win too, Luke said with a grin. Lux still hadn't mentally prepared herself to accept defeat. She held up her 4 sixes, staring in disbelief. She lost. With a god-tier hand like this, she still lost. Why did you pass earlier? Lux snapped as she finally reacted, furious as she demanded an explanation. He obviously could have ended the game earlier, but he kept passing. Luke only answered her with a smile. In an instant, Lux understood. If he had gone out earlier, how could the one losing right now possibly be her? He did it on purpose. This hateful guy did it on purpose. Then can we move on to the punishment? Luke said cheerfully, raising his hand and flexing his fingers a little. Lux immediately put on a pitiful, helpless little rabbit expression and whispered, Your Highness, can you be gentler? Don't worry. Luke smiled at her with warm tenderness. He pressed his middle finger and thumb together, brought them up to Lux's forehead, and flicked with force. Dong! In the scorching summer heat, that sound was crisp and sweet, like a perfectly ripe watermelon. My head, it's splitting open. Lux wailed, crying as she rolled around on the sofa clutching her forehead. The proud undefeated king had fallen. That flick almost sent her straight to the heavens. It took a long while before the pain finally eased. She sat back up, shooting Luke a look that was half grievance, half rage, and swore to herself. This revenge will be repaid. Kahina felt sorry for her, so she only reached out and gently tapped Lux's forehead once. Second round. Lux demanded immediately, eyes burning with vengeful resolve. Want me to shuffle? Luke gathered up the cards on the table and asked with a smile. Naturally, the 2 girls had no objections. Luke shuffled seriously for a few moments, removed 4 cards, then started dealing. Kahina and Lux exchanged a secret glance. This time, they were definitely going to make him lose. 2 minutes later, Kahina stared at the single card left in her hand, and at Luke, who held the lead, trembling slightly. A pair of 7s, a pair of 9s, 3 6s. Luke laid down his cards, announcing the end of the game. He was a big believer in fairness. Since he'd already flicked Miss Crownguard's forehead once, then Miss Bovelli couldn't be left out. As Luke's words fell, clear despair appeared in Kahina's eyes. Your Highness, remember, she tried to say something to awaken a shred of conscience in him, but she didn't even get to finish before Luke's fingers flicked out. Dong! This watermelon sound was just as crisp. Someone once told Luke, if you want to know whether a watermelon is sweet, you listen to whether it sounds loud when you tap it. Nice and loud. Luke said, satisfied, pulling his hand back. Kahina instantly understood exactly what kind of pain Lux had just suffered. She let out a muffled whimper, stubbornly refusing to cry out loud. How about we stop? Luke said sympathetically. I'm worried you 2 won't be able to take it. No. The moment the words left his mouth, both girls rejected him in perfect unison. They'd come this far, there was no backing out now. But their stubbornness, in the face of real strength, was utterly helpless. After 2 more games, tears clung to the corners of Lux and Kahina's eyes. With cards in hand, they looked at Luke carefully, their pitiful little gazes practically begging for mercy. They had gradually realized something. Luke was strong. And not just strong, absurdly strong. This hateful guy had acted like he didn't know how to play at first, purely to make them drop their guard. Even when they teamed up, they hadn't won a single time. This hand's pretty good, Luke said as he played a long straight, starting with the 3 of hearts, then a 3 of a kind, and finally a bomb to close. The game had barely started before it was already over. Meanwhile, Lux and Kahina still had a pile of cards in their hands. The 2 of them went completely dumbfounded, then looked at each other. At that moment, whatever sisterly bond they'd had was gone. What remained was only one truth: winner takes all. A slaughter began. Neither held back, both trying to kill the other on the spot. If someone had to lose, it absolutely could not be me. When the game ended, Lux collapsed onto the sofa, limp all over, her face full of despair. Luke wore a devil's smile as he slowly approached. Miss Crownguard trembled, terrified, and squeezed her eyes shut. But this time, Luke only flicked lightly. Because he was a little worried if he flicked her stupid, would he have to take responsibility afterward? After all these games, it was like her already not bright brain had been hit with a fresh layer of snow on top of frost. Lux let out a breath of relief. For a brief moment, she even felt grateful that Luke had gone easy on her. Still want to play? Luke asked. The instant the two girls heard that, their bodies shuddered. Nope, I'm done. My mom's calling me home for dinner. I still have to go to the Illuminators' church this afternoon. I'm going back to rest first. Farewell, Your Highness. They fled in a panic, their earlier confidence completely gone. Today's revenge plan officially failed. They were the ones who suggested the punishment in the first place, and in the end, they were still the ones who suffered for it. Yurna, well done. Luke smiled at his maid. She was sensible. He was very satisfied. Earlier, when he told Yurna to go get fruit, there hadn't actually been any fruit in his house at all. When Yurna went upstairs and discovered that, she understood Luke's meaning. After she came back down, she didn't stand behind him. Instead, she stood behind the two girls. When those two were exchanging flirty little signals and secret codes, they had no idea Yurna was also feeding their whole cards to Luke. Of course, that was just insurance for the first round. Hearing Luke's praise, Yurna stood quietly to the side without speaking, silently sympathizing in her heart. Miss Crownguard and Miss Bovelli were so pitiful. They didn't know that the moment His Highness gained the right to shuffle, it had already become a game where whoever he wanted to lose would lose. 47, Chapter 47, That's Why It's So Expensive. 47, Chapter 47, That's Why It's So Expensive. Get everything settled. It's none, let's eat out. Luke was in a very good mood, and once again decided to go dine at a proper restaurant. Don't ask. If you ask, the answer is, because he's rich. Yurna had come straight here with luggage. Hearing that, she gave a slight bow. Yes, Your Highness. With the luggage in hand, she chose a room on the first floor more convenient for everything. Luke, having nothing to do, sat on the sofa and stared at the deck of cards Lux had forgotten to take with her. He casually picked one up and toyed with it. Then a new idea struck him. He aimed at the cabinet on the far side and flicked his wrist with one hand. Whoosh! The playing card carved a straight line through the air and pinned itself precisely into the cabinet. Twisted fate? The thought flashed through Luke's mind, and he found it amusing. When Yurna came out of the room, she happened to see Luke striking dramatic poses while flinging playing cards, having the time of his life. A trace of confusion appeared in her eyes. She didn't know what His Highness was doing, but she waited patiently at the side anyway. Finished tidying up? Then let's go. Luke noticed Yurna beside him and stopped. Throwing playing cards wasn't that interesting. Yeah, some other day, he'd level up that sleight of hand skill a bit more. The two of them left the mansion one after the other. Outside, the weather was a bit hot, the sun pouring out heat without restraint. Luke suddenly realized something. As a prince, he couldn't just walk everywhere every day. He needed some kind of transportation. The most popular thing right now was a carriage. He should get one. Preferably something flashy, worthy of his status. He'd leave that to Yurna. For today, they'd just make do. Luke was getting tired of the restaurant they went to last time, so he decided to switch it up. He strolled around for a bit, and before long found a high-end place that looked pretty good. The manager was deeply honored by the prince's visit and personally came out to receive him, brimming with enthusiasm. The food came quickly, too. In no time, the dishes Luke ordered were set on the table steaming hot, rich with aroma. During the meal, there was a small issue. When Luke ate, Yurna stood quietly off to the side. It looked like she planned to wait until Luke finished, then go eat afterward. There really was a rule here that servants couldn't eat at the same table as their master. Among nobles, it was called table etiquette, an old tradition that wasn't meant to be crossed. Luke, living a second life, didn't care about that sort of thing. Still, he wasn't planning to change anything, either. He just thought, if he finished and then had to wait for her, that would be annoying. So he glanced at Yurna. Sit and eat. Yes, Your Highness. Yurna bowed in reply. She rarely showed expression, and simply walked to the opposite side, sat down, and began to eat. That was one thing Luke found extremely satisfying about her. Obedient. Especially obedient. No matter what Luke ordered, Yurna would carry it out immediately, never adding a single unnecessary word. While eating, Luke glanced up briefly. Yurna ate as quietly as she lived, small bites, unhurried, looking very proper and refined. But her face showed absolutely no reaction to the taste. As if delicious and terrible were exactly the same to her. Luke suddenly wondered, if Yurna ate truly incredible food, would she show a new expression? He tucked the question away and kept eating. By the time Luke was nearly done, Yurna was almost finished as well. Even though she ate in small bites, she wasn't slow at all. Or rather, it was more like she timed it perfectly to finish when he did. If Luke ate faster, her pace would probably still match. Luke picked up the napkin and dabbed at his mouth, then raised a hand in a small gesture. The manager, who had been watching from afar, hurried over at once. How much? Luke asked. Your Highness, it's an honor for you to visit. This meal is on the house. The manager bowed slightly, smiling. As long as you come often. No need. Luke stood. Your napai, whatever it costs. I'll wait outside. Luke naturally wasn't going to mooch a meal. He gave Yurna the instruction and walked out. The manager stared after him, full of regret. After waiting outside for a moment, Yurna came out as well. Your Highness, it was 28 gold in total. Let's go. Luke nodded casually. Even more expensive than the previous restaurant. But Luke didn't feel the slightest pain. Don't ask if you ask, it's because he's rich. After he'd appeared at the Grand Plaza, his status had become truly extraordinary. He was the kingdom's suddenly revealed second prince. Whether openly or in the shadows, people were definitely watching him. Little favors like comped meals weren't worth accepting at all. Walking along the street, Luke remembered the swordsmanship enthusiasts training camp he'd visited before. He thought this would be a good time to go work off the food. And maybe just maybe he'd run into Fiora by chance. With that thought, he glanced sideways and sized up Yurna. She was wearing an eye-catching maid outfit, her long legs below the knee-length skirt wrapped in black stockings, drawing plenty of attention. Let's go to a clothing shop first. Change into something casual. After thinking it over, Luke decided to change her outfit first. Before long, Yurna's maid uniform was replaced with a light, convenient set of everyday clothes. Only after she took off the maid outfit did her figure really show curves in all the right places. They wandered to the mask shop and pushed the door open. Pick one you like. As he spoke, Luke went to the mask rack and chose another frog mask. The one he bought last time was at home. He hadn't thought to bring it when he went out. The rabbit attendant recognized him at a glance and said, "Before you leave, you can store your mask with us. We guarantee we won't reveal a customer's identity." "Is that so?" Luke responded, but still bought a new one. By then, Yurna seemed to have chosen her preferred mask as well. She pointed to a black cat mask and said to the attendant, "This one." "This one's a bit more expensive, 10 gold, the rabbit attendant said. Yurna looked to Luke. Luke nodded. He'd already handed his wallet to Yurna. She had the money on her. With his approval, Yurna paid. Once she put on the black cat mask, it paired nicely with her ever-calm violet eyes and it even came with a pair of cat ears. Luke figured that was where the price went. He brought Yurna into the alley. After entering the training camp, he glanced at the rabbit attendant walking ahead. Then Luke gave Yurna a quiet reminder from behind. "Everyone's equal in there. Once we're inside, keep a low profile." "Yes." Yurna answered this time. She dropped the "Your Highness." Luke didn't really mind people knowing his identity. But those were the training camp's rules, and he could only follow them. 48 Chapter 48 Looks like we hit an iron wall again. The rule here is simple, you duel someone one-on-one. The winner can take points from the loser, Luke said as they walked. And those points seem to have a lot of uses. Yurna followed behind and gave a slight nod. "Can you use a sword?" Luke turned and asked. "I can, a little," Yurna replied. "Alright. Then go look around on your own, or find someone to spar with. I'm going to the restroom." He'd probably had too much water that morning. After leaving her with that, Luke turned to go find the restroom. Something like that obviously wasn't something Yurna should follow him into. And Yurna understood what he meant, so she didn't. When Luke finished and came back, he happened to catch a pretty entertaining scene. He'd just been thinking how he hadn't run into anyone familiar, and then there one was. Up on the ring, a burly man wearing a bear mask was explaining the rules to his opponent. "You're called Black Cat, right? Put your protective gear on properly. There aren't many female swordsmen in this training camp. If there's anything you don't understand, let me teach you." The bear mask's voice was rough, but right now it sounded almost absurdly gentle. For one very simple reason. His opponent was Yurna. Luke hadn't felt like thinking too hard, so he just named her Black Cat on the spot. In a hot-blooded training camp like this, just like Bear Mask said, there were women here but not many. Let alone someone like Yurna, a great figure, and a presence that looked refined at a glance. With the mask framing them, those violet eyes of hers looked even more striking, more lingering. Yurna put on her gear and chose a short blade as her weapon. A crowd had gathered below the ring. Part of it was because Bear Mask had a reputation, and the other part didn't really need explaining. Here we go, the classic starting. Newbie killers back in business. This guy's been behaving for a few days ever since he got put in his place last time. Didn't think he'd show up again today. What he's after, we all know. The chatter was non-stop. From what Luke heard, Bear Mask really had come back. And honestly he had good taste in targets. At this point, both fighters' names had been registered. A rabbit attendant stood below the ring with a ledger in hand, ready to record the result. Bear Mask spoke with confidence and perfect gentlemanly flair. "When the bell rings, the duel starts. You can attack at any time. Don't worry, I can take it." Yurna heard him and didn't react at all. Ding! The bell rang. Bear Mask smiled. "Go on. Come at me." He was thinking to himself, another day full of gentlemanly charm. Wouldn't this have the girl totally dazzled? Yurna stepped forward the moment the bell rang. No fancy footwork, and her movements didn't resemble any recognizable sword style. She simply closed the distance, raised the short blade when she was near, and brought it down. "Your sword." Bear Mask confidently started to give pointers, but then he suddenly realized the speed of that strike was what the hell kind of fast. His vision blurred. He hurriedly lifted his greatsword. Clang! The greatsword flew sideways right out of his hands. And along with the sword, Bear Mask's huge body went flying too. By the time he crashed down off the ring, the spectators still hadn't fully processed what they'd just seen. Bear Mask was stunned as well, like he couldn't believe it. "I got one shot. Didn't you say you could take it?" Someone in the crowd finally blurted out, snapping back to reality. That was a little embarrassing. Bear Mask got up, cleared his throat, and somehow managed not to look too awkward. Looks like I hit a wall again. Seriously, what has been going on these past few days? Last time it was a frog. This time it's a black cat. And they keep getting stronger. This one just deleted him in one hit. How was he supposed to play like that? This black cat seems strong. No kidding. She one-shot Bear Mask. You can do that. I wonder who's stronger between her and Fiora. Definitely Fiora. Fiora is forever the GOAT. Some fanatic nearby threw an arm into the air yelling. Luke immediately took a few steps away in disgust. Still, Luke could tell Yurna really did have skill. Bear Mask was, at best, an apprentice. Challenging someone at the unyielding peak stage, of course he'd get instantly crushed. Just then, someone recognized Luke. Hey, aren't you the frog swordsman? You're here too. The person greeted him. After all, in this training camp, basically nobody wore such a dopey-looking frog mask. As attention drifted away from Black Cat, people naturally noticed Luke. As the guy who'd made Bear Mask retire last time and the guy Fiora had boldly tipped with 300 points, quite a few people still remembered him. A number of them came over to say hello. Luke answered them one by one. Over on Bear Mask's side, he'd gotten 30 points deducted and had been wailing about it. Hearing the commotion here, he jogged over too. Where've you been these days? Haven't seen you. He was pretty friendly, all things considered. The big guy wasn't bad at here that just liked picking on newcomers. Luke's impression of him was decent, so he replied, had some things to deal with. With the fight over, the crowd dispersed. And because of what Yurna had just shown, nobody dared go up and flirt with her now. She didn't come to bother Luke either. She stepped down from the ring and waited quietly a short distance away. Where's Fiora? Luke asked curiously. Maybe she's not here today. I heard she's got a duel scheduled for this afternoon. She's probably still preparing. After saying that, Bear Mask added, but you won't really run into her in the outer area anyway. With your skill, you should go check the inner area. The inner area? Yep. Bear Mask nodded. You noticed it too, right? Me included. The outer area doesn't really have many people who can actually use a sword. It's mostly sword enthusiasts who call themselves swordsmen. The real monsters are in the inner area. Fiora Tushi's usually active in there. Sword enthusiast and swordsman weren't the same thing. When Luke came last time, he'd already noticed the training camp's skill range was ridiculously wide. He just hadn't known there was an inner area. Now it clicked. No wonder he'd followed someone in last time but couldn't find them. Then they'd suddenly appeared later. They'd gone into the inner area. Once he understood, Luke asked, where's the entrance? There are two. Usually people go straight in through the corridor. The second entrance is over there. See that tunnel at the far end? As he spoke, Bear Mask pointed toward the deepest part on the left. Luke followed the direction and spotted a tunnel entrance. Go down through that and you're in the inner area. If you want to enter, someone will explain the details. I won't bother. Bear Mask clearly couldn't be bothered explaining. He'd just taken another big points hit and was in a miserable mood. Thanks, Luke said. No big deal. Bear Mask sighed and turned away. Right now, he was seriously considering whether he should actually retire for real this time. 49, Chapter 49, Miss Fiora. After entering the inner area, Luke quickly realized it was much more professional in here. For example, ranked tiers. The inner area used 4 kinds of badges: iron, bronze, silver, and gold, dividing everyone into 4 ranks. That made the gap in strength much clearer. It also made things more competitive. Lower-ranked fighters could refuse duel invitations from higher-ranked fighters, while higher-ranked fighters could not refuse duels issued by lower-ranked fighters. The penalty for refusing was a points deduction. There were also more professional scorekeepers, with point changes recorded and updated at any time. In the outer area, point changes were handled on a daily standard, based on the last recorded score. Whatever your points were for that day stayed the same for determining gains and losses, regardless of wins or defeats. Only the next day would your new points be updated. All of that was tournament structure. Luke wasn't really interested. After asking around a bit, he learned that Fiora, just like Bear Mask had said, really was scheduled to duel someone called Third Young Master of the Capital this afternoon. Inner area, huh. Even the nicknames sounded a lot more flashy. The duel challenge had naturally been issued by Third Young Master of the Capital. There was only an hour left until the duel time. Luke's timing today was pretty perfect. Since it wouldn't be long, he rented a lounge with points and took a short nap. Time ticked by. More and more people gathered outside. Yurna gently shook Luke awake. After his nap, Luke felt pleasantly sluggish. He sat up, yawned, and walked out of the lounge. A crowd had already formed outside. All the front row viewing spots had been snatched up, and the 2 fighters were already standing on the ring. The most eye-catching one was Fiora, dressed in white. Wearing that white face mask, she stood on the stage with a cool, distant aura, holding a slender blade in her hand. Her opponent wore a painted face mask, dressed in ornate clothes, and his weapon was also a longsword. Fiora, Third Young Master of the Capital, said with polished courtesy, if I win, will you let me see your face beneath the mask? To be fair, he really did have a gentlemanly air when he spoke, nothing like Bear Mask's forced performance. Fiora only answered calmly, "You won't win. No need to say that so early." Third young master of the capital showed a confident smile. "Anything is possible. My ranking is second only to yours. Why would I have no chance to win?" "Because you won't win." Fiora repeated it again, her voice cold. She had no interest in this fight to begin with. She was even starting to lose interest in the training camp itself. She ranked first because the camp's ceiling was right there, and he ranked second because his own ceiling only reached second. That simple truth was exactly why this place no longer held any possibility of making her stronger. From the day she discovered this place to the day she became its strongest, it had taken Fiora less than half a year. Even if there's a tiny chance. Third young master of the capital asked again, unwilling to give up. "If you can make me feel even a little interest, just a little, I'll take off my mask," Fiora said, her patience thinning, but still giving him that. The moment those words landed, the crowd below erupted. The mysterious Fiora hate. Did the face under that mask look like? For so long, it had been a topic of endless speculation, a scene countless people had imagined. Was today finally the day they'd see it? The crowd grew excited, throwing encouraging looks at third young master of the capital, hoping he'd step up and deliver. He raised his longsword vertically in front of his face, his expression sharpening. "Fine. Then watch closely." Fiora simply held her blade angled at her side, her eyes as cool and clear as ever. Ding! A crisp bell rang from below. In the same instant, both fighters moved. But the fastest was Fiora. Her slender blade thrust out like a streak of white light. Third young master of the capital swung to block, but the second strike was already stabbing in. His pressure instantly spiked to the limit. Still, he was ranked second for a reason. His mind worked quickly, and he found a response at once. He twisted his body hard to the side, catching an opening to counterattack. Fiora shifted into defense, letting him press forward. But after only a few exchanges, disappointment grew heavier and heavier in her eyes. A sword style forged like it came off an assembly line, every move and posture locked into a fixed pattern. It carried generations of experience, yes, but it also shackled the user inside it. She had seen this kind of swordplay too many times. She could even predict his next move. She could even tell where his next strike would land. Flat. Boring. Once her interest vanished, Fiora began to apply force. With a sharp upward flick, she knocked his longsword aside, and then her offense fell like a rainstorm. Third young master of the capital struggled to defend, retreating step by step, the pressure doubling with every step back. He tried to counterattack in the gaps but quickly realized it would only make him lose faster. Before long, he couldn't hold on anymore. Even though Fiora's weapon wasn't sharpened, every hit still sent sharp pain through his body. Finally, his sword was cut away and sent flying, and Fiora's slender blade stopped right in front of his face. "I lost. Fiora, you really are incredible." Third young master of the capital sighed, then because he'd lasted so long asked with hopeful anticipation, "And your evaluation of me is?" "A stagnant pool. Unbearably dull." Fiora drew her blade back and delivered 8 icy words. Third young master of the capital froze. He hadn't expected the strength he took such pride in to earn only that. To the spectators, the result seemed almost inevitable. Fiora turned, about to leave. Then, in the crowd, she caught sight of a frog mask that looked unbelievably dopey. Just standing there made the wearer seem silly. In an inner area full of all kinds of masks, it was distinctive in its own way. More importantly, Fiora remembered that mask. "Frog swordsman." She murmured it softly. A lot of people below heard her and immediately started looking around, trying to see who that name belonged to. In the crowd, Luke raised a hand in greeting. "Fiora, we meet again." Everyone realized there really was only one frog mask in sight. A few people from the outer area also recognized him. Fiora, who had been about to leave, suddenly changed her mind and invited him herself. "Want to spar?" "Sure." Luke answered immediately. As the crowd instinctively parted to make a path, he walked up onto the ring. At this moment, the people who had never heard of the frog swordsman couldn't help feeling confused. Why had Fiora suddenly issued an invitation? And third young master of the capital, who had already stepped down and was about to leave, also stopped and stared, puzzled. Ever since entering the training camp, he had never once seen Fiora proactively invite someone to spar. "Tien, thank you so much for the stones." 50, Chapter 50. This is straight up trying to kill me. Now, though, she had invited this frog swordsman Simeon most of them had barely even heard of. Third young master of the capital, who had been about to leave, stopped in place. At this moment, Luke had already stepped onto the ring. The audience below still hadn't dispersed, and the chatter continued, but Fiora didn't care. She looked Luke over once, then asked, "Have you improved lately?" Her impression of the frog swordsman wasn't just a little. If anything, it was deep. Because the swordplay he used, while it felt inexperienced from top to bottom, every move and every form was incredibly novel. It was something she had never seen before. And with just one look, she could be sure of it. This sword style had tremendous growth potential. "A bit," Luke said modestly. "Is that so?" Fiora raised her blade, took 2 steps back, and said, "Then same as last time. When you're ready, you can attack whenever you want." She suppressed her strength. Thinking back to their last bout, she assumed Luke wouldn't have improved all that much in just a few days. Alright. Luke took a deep breath. A wind-like presence gathered around him. The spectators might not have noticed anything, but Fiora, standing across from him, could clearly feel it. Luke's aura had changed. A rare hint of interest surfaced in her cool eyes. The next second, Luke attacked. He dashed forward, sweeping blade, his sword light carving a half-arc through the air. Fiora blocked the first strike, and immediately felt something was off. Luke's blade, stopped by the parry, flowed upward in the same motion. Wind gathered along the edge, and then he thrust Steel Tempest straight in. That attack made even Fiora feel danger. She reflexively stepped back and raised her sword, blocking with genuine focus. Then, as Luke's follow-up exchanges came in, a flicker of surprise appeared in Fiora's eyes. You call this a bit? In just those few strikes, even she'd been caught off guard. With a small ripple in her thoughts, Fiora shifted from defense to offense and raised the level of strength she was suppressing. Luke met attack with attack. The familiar pressure surged back, but this time he seemed able to handle it more smoothly. After several defensive exchanges, he could still find openings to strike back. Fiora's surprise didn't lessen, it grew. She became more and more convinced that her first feeling hadn't been wrong. This frog swordsman's strength hadn't just increased by a tiny amount. His swordplay was sharper, his power greater, and even his footwork carried a harder to pin down, almost elusive quality. It was, without question, a massive leap. But when she thought about it, how long had it been since she'd last seen him? 5 days. That rate of growth. A thoughtful look appeared in Fiora's eyes. I lose. Luke felt the pressure mounting higher and higher. He figured he was about to crack, so he surrendered. Fiora snapped back to herself, looked at the sword in her hand, and realized she'd unconsciously raised her output again. She couldn't help feeling a little awkward. After a second of silence, she said, You've improved a lot. Have I? Luke honestly wasn't sure. This was only the 3rd time in his life he'd fought someone. In his eyes, it really did feel like just a small improvement. But the truth was, the wind swordsmanship had only 9 levels total. Even 1 level of progress was already a huge variable. And his strength had reached the early heroic stage. Add in his gecko wall-crawling footwork woven into his movement. His combat ability had practically undergone a qualitative change. No wonder Fiora looked surprised. I'm leaving. Are you coming? Fiora considered for a moment, then asked. Since it sounded like an invitation, Luke had no reason to refuse. He nodded. Sure. The moment the crowd heard Fiora say that, they exploded again. Leaving together? What did that mean? Leaving the training camp together? And when they saw Fiora and the frog swordsman actually walking away side by side, it only confirmed what everyone was thinking. Damn. If they were leaving the training camp together, didn't that mean the kid called Frog Swordsman might get to see the face beneath Fiora's mask? And Fiora had brought it up herself. Third young master of the capital was completely baffled too. He'd watched from below the whole time and couldn't see what was so special about that frog swordsman. At best, the guy knew some swordsmanship. If he went up there, he'd make him surrender in a few exchanges. So why was Fiora so interested in him? And now they were even leaving together. Was she going to reveal her face to him in private? The more he thought about it, the more unbalanced he felt. Why him? At this moment, Luke and Fiora were already moving through the inner area passage toward the main floor corridor. The lighting there was dim. Fiora spoke. Want to know why I called you to come with me? Luke asked curiously, why? When he turned his head, he saw Fiora had already lifted a pale hand to her mask. Then, without the slightest hesitation, she removed it. Beneath the mask was a breathtakingly beautiful face, snow-white skin, soft red lips, a delicate, refined oval face with a cold, striking allure. Her cool eyes were as beautiful as pure ice. Long black hair spilled over her shoulders, with 2 distinctive red bangs framing the front. The Grand Duelist Fiora. Your Highness, Fiora said with a faint smile, next time you follow someone, you should be a little more careful. So you noticed a long time ago. Luke wasn't really surprised. Last time, when Fiora led him weaving left and right, he'd already had a vague feeling she might have realized she was being followed. Fiora asked, have we met before? No, it's just that you resemble a friend of mine, so I acted on impulse, Luke said, shaking his head. He obviously couldn't say that friend of his was literally the Grand Duelist. As a former top lane player, it was only natural he'd be curious. Is that so? Fiora watched him with those cool eyes as he spoke. He didn't look like he was lying, but she didn't really care about that. What interested her more was the sword art Luke carried. She withdrew her gaze, walking forward as she said, your swordplay is very interesting. Walking beside her, Luke smiled. I'm honored. If you train seriously for some time, I think you'll have great achievements in the art of the sword in the future. That was Fiora's evaluation. She was born with exceptional instinct for the blade. She wouldn't claim she'd seen every sword style in Demacia, but she knew quite a bit about the reputable, established ones. As for the obscure, unranked styles, most of them were unimpressive anyway. But Luke's swordplay was something she had never seen before. With his talent, he might achieve something remarkable one day. Hearing that, Luke didn't respond, he just acted like he hadn't heard. Train hard? What? That's basically asking for my life.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.